Greetings, traveler of hours. I am the Watcher. Before we drift into the past, breathe with me. Take in this air. It is the breath of the old earth. The same air that once filled the lungs of generations now folded into the soil. Here, in the quiet space between night and day, time grows thin. The presence of those who walked this ground before you lingers like a faint echo in the morning mist. They are the reason I have brought you here. I wish to show you the vessel they inhabited, the human body. Think of it as a clay pot shaped by patient hands. Astonishingly resilient, yet perilously fragile. It can endure a lifetime of labor, cradle new life, mend its own wounds, and feel the warmth of a winter fire. Yet, a single fall can shatter it. A fever can crack it. A hidden flaw can cause it to crumble with time. For countless centuries, we have worked and danced, fought and loved in these earthen shells. The thread of our experience is woven through time, binding us in a tapestry of shared flesh and bone. The ache in your back after a long day's toil is an ancient ache. The joy of a full belly, the fear stirred by a sudden cough, the quiet pleasure of stretching in the sun. These are not new. They are eternal. This journey is not one of kings and castles, but of breath and heartbeat. We will not chart the rise of empires, but the delicate, uncertain path of a single life. There is no need to hurry. Let your mind grow still and drift beside me through the ages. We will witness the quiet strength it took simply to endure, the shadows of sickness that never wandered far, and the defiant joy that bloomed between them. The morning begins without haste, as though the sun itself must consider whether to rise. Mist clings to the hollows between the cottages, pooling in the low places like water held in an unseen hand. It is the kind of mist that mutes every sound, so that even the cry of a waking rooster feels like it travels no further than the next thatched roof. I stand at the edge of the green, watching the first shapes emerge from their homes. A door creaks, a hinge complaining softly, and a woman steps out carrying a pair of wooden buckets. The iron handles bite into her palms, but she does not flinch. Her arms have long since hardened to this weight. She pauses only to pull her wool shawl tighter about her shoulders, then makes her way toward the well, her boots leaving dark prints in the dew-soaked earth. From another cottage comes the sound of a latch lifting. A boy of perhaps 7 slips out, barefooted, hair sticking up from sleep. He is chasing a chicken before the door has even swung shut, his thin legs kicking up little spurts of dust as he runs. The bird darts left, then right, wings flapping in indignation, until the boy's laughter scatters the quiet. His mother calls after him, not unkindly, and he vanishes round the corner with his prize. Along the lane, an elder sits hunched on a low stool, coaxing life back into last night's fire. His fingers are knotted with age, his movements deliberate. Each time he breathes out, a small cloud escapes into the cool air. A cough interrupts his work, deep, unhurried, the sort that seems part of the morning's ritual rather than a sign of sickness. In this place, such sounds are woven into the fabric of life. The air carries the smells of damp thatch, wood smoke, and the faint sour tang of yesterday's ale emptied into the ditch. A thin trail of geese crosses the green, their necks bobbing as they waddle toward the stream. Somewhere unseen, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The houses are close together, their walls of wattle and daub patched with fresh clay in some places, cracked and crumbling in others. The roofs sag under the weight of the damp, reeds and straw glistening faintly with dew. Windows are small, more whole than glass, shuttered at night against the cold and the eyes of passers-by. A man emerges from the last house on the lane, carrying a hoe over his shoulder. He nods to the woman at the well, who pauses to shift her grip on the buckets before tipping the rope over the edge. The wooden pail descends with a low creak of the windlass, vanishing into shadow until the splash below answers it. The rope strains under the weight of water as she draws it up, droplets spilling over the rim to darken the ground at her feet. In the distance, the church bell begins its slow toll, a sound that seems to come not from the tower itself but from the very air. Its voice is deep, steady, a reminder that the day has begun whether one is ready or not. People listen without pausing. The bell marks not the hour but the order of things. I walk past the weaver's cottage, where a small window stands open to the cool air. Inside, I glimpse the loom, the warp threads waiting in their frame like the ribs of some great beast. A length of cloth hangs half-finished, its colors muted in the morning light. It will be days before it is complete, perhaps longer if the weaver's cough worsens. Work waits for no one here, yet the body has its own timetable, one not always willing to bend to need. As I move on, the lane narrows, hemmed in by garden plots. Peas climb their stakes, broad leaves heavy with dew, while leeks and onions push their green spears through the dark soil. These small rectangles of earth are a family's lifeline, their worth greater than coin. A failed crop is not a loss to be mourned, it is a threat to be feared. At the far end of the village, the smith's forge stands silent for now, though the anvil gleams faintly where yesterday's work left its mark. A pair of worn boots lies at the threshold, toes pointed toward the road, as though their owner might step into them at any moment. He will, once the sun lifts and the orders begin. For now, the village breathes in unison, gathering strength for the hours ahead. I have seen mornings like this in 1,000 places, 1,000 ages. The shapes of the houses change, the tools in hand take on new forms, but the rhythm, the slow unfurling of a community into the day, remains the same. It is a rhythm that speaks of endurance, and yet beneath it runs an awareness too quiet to name aloud. Each of these faces may vanish before the year turns. The smallest misfortune, a fall from a ladder, a fever carried in on the breath, can pull a thread from this tapestry, leaving a gap that will never truly be mended. Still, they rise. They fetch water, light fires, chase chickens, and coax the earth to yield what it can. This is not the labor of grand ambition. It is the labor of survival. And in that, there is a dignity older than kings. The mist begins to lift now, curling away into the lightning sky. Shadows shorten, and the green stirs with the business of the day. A cart rattles in from the fields, its wheels groaning over the ruts. A girl carries a bundle of kindling past me, her eyes fixed on the path, the wood stacked higher than her chin. It would be easy to mistake such a morning for peace. But here, peace is not the absence of danger. It is the brief reprieve before it returns. And so the day begins, as it always has, with hope measured not in dreams, but in the simple act of stepping out one's door. In this village, there is no clock face to consult, no polished brass hands turning in orderly circles. Time moves here with the sky, with the air, with the taste of what grows in the earth. It is not measured in minutes, but in the swell and retreat of the seasons. When spring first stirs, the signs are quiet but certain. The hedgerows take on a faint haze of green, as though some careful painter has brushed the bare branches with the lightest stroke. Lambs, still uncertain on their legs, stumble after their mothers in the pasture. The sound of running water swells as the frost withdraws from the ground. A farmer will press a clod of damp soil in his fist, testing its readiness, and declare the day fit for planting. Summer comes without fanfare, only the gradual thickening of leaf and the high drone of bees over the meadow. The air grows heavier, sweet with the scent of clover and cut hay. In the long light of evening, children play in the lanes until shadows finally stretch across the green. For these months, the earth is generous, but never without limits. Every fair day must be used, for no one knows when a sudden storm will lay the grain flat in the fields. Autumn's arrival is measured in the sound of scythes and the dust of chaff in the air. The harvest is a season of urgency, of every hand set to work. Men cut the barley and bind it into sheaves. Women gather apples into baskets lined with straw. Smoke rises from the cottages as beans and peas are dried, fish are salted, and the precious stores for winter are sealed in earthen jars. There is satisfaction in the labor, but also unease, the gnawing thought that perhaps it will not be enough to last until spring returns. Winter is not a single moment, but a drawing in. The wind grows restless, prowling around the eaves and searching for cracks in the shuttered windows. The fields lie bare and brown, the furrows laced with frost. Work does not stop. It shifts indoors to mending, spinning, and weaving. But the days are short, and the darkness stretches deep into the morning and early over the afternoon. Each day's firewood is measured carefully. Each ember coaxed to live a little longer before the next log is surrendered to the flames. It is in winter that the thread of life feels most fragile. The stores dwindle, the coughs spread, and the road to the next season can seem impossibly long. Yet it is also in winter that the bonds of the village tighten. Neighbors share a pot of broth, a length of spun yarn, an evening by the hearth with stories old enough to have no true beginning. Here, in this place, years are not spoken of in numbers. The people say, "It was the lambing after the great frost," or, "That was the harvest when the river flooded." The past is bound to the events that shaped it, to the seasons that carried it forward. A woman in her garden marks the passing weeks by the bloom and fade of her plants. She knows that when the hawthorn blossoms, she must prepare for shearing. When the blackberries ripen, it is time to cut the last hay. She keeps no written record. The knowledge is in her hands, in her eyes, in the rhythm of her breath. The watcher, myself, has walked in many such villages, seen many such cycles. I have watched the lambing come and go in centuries where the tools were of bronze, of iron, of steel. I have seen the same anxiety in the eyes of a man testing his grain with a millstone, whether he lived by a Roman road or in the shadow of a Norman keep. The seasons have always ruled more firmly than kings. In such a life, there is no clear beginning or end to the year. It is a wheel, turning without pause, and each person must walk its rim for as long as they are able. When the harvest fails, that turn of the wheel grows steep and perilous. When the grain is heavy and the barns full, the way is smooth for a while, but the descent into winter is inevitable. There is a certain wisdom in living this way, a patience born of knowing that the cold will not last forever, nor the warmth. Every joy is tempered by the knowledge of its passing, every sorrow softened by the certainty of change. The bell from the church tolls again, its sound carrying further now that the mist has burned away. Somewhere, a man in the fields straightens his back, leaning on his hoe to listen. The note hangs in the air for a moment, then fades into the quiet hum of the village. Children pause their play to watch a flock of birds wheeling overhead, their formation shifting like a banner in the wind. To them, the seasons are a game, a changing backdrop for the adventures of their days. Only in time will they come to feel the weight of the wheel turning beneath their feet. I linger by the well, where a woman draws water and spills a little onto the ground. The sunlight catches the droplets, making them glint before they vanish into the earth. So it is with the moments of life here, bright for an instant, then gone, absorbed into the endless turning of the year. In this place, the distance between the cradle and the grave is not measured in miles or years, but in steps. It is not uncommon for the same hands that swaddle an infant in the morning to lay out a body by evening. Life here is a loom on which two threads are always visible, the bright, fragile line of birth and the dark, inevitable one of death, woven so close that they sometimes touch before the pattern is complete. In a cottage at the edge of the green, a mother sits by the hearth, her child nestled in the crook of her arm. The baby's face is round, the skin flushed with the warmth of the fire, eyelids fluttering in dreams too new to have a shape. The mother rocks slowly, not to soothe the child, but to keep her own body from stiffening in the chill that seeps in through the walls. Her song is little more than a hum, an old melody her own mother once sang, the words half forgotten, but the tune as much a part of her as the color of her eyes. She watches for every change in the child's breathing. Too fast could mean a fever, too shallow could mean a chill settling into the lungs. There is no physician here, no apothecary's shop, no glass jars filled with powders and tinctures. Only her own knowledge, learned in shadowed rooms beside sickbeds, and the hope that this child's body will resist the unseen hands that so often reach for the young. The door opens, and her husband steps in, stamping the mud from his boots. His eyes linger on the child for a moment, perhaps counting the small breaths, before he moves to hang his cloak. The look is quick, but it is not casual. It is a silent check, a confirmation that all is well for now. Across the green, two men work in the churchyard. Their shovels bite into the damp earth, lifting clods dark with last night's rain. The ground resists them, as though reluctant to give up its rest, but they are steady, measured. There is no rush in their work. The body they will receive is already beyond the reach of time. The bell tolls once, a single low note that trembles in the air before fading. It is not the call to service, nor the marking of an hour. It is a signal that a life has ended, that the village must prepare to gather. Some will come to lay flowers, others to stand silently with their heads bowed. The act is both duty and comfort, for in a place where the thread of life is so thin, the ending of one strand is felt by all. Inside the small church, the air is cool, scented faintly with beeswax and stone. Light falls in narrow shafts through windows of thick, uneven glass. Here, the walls have heard the first cries of newborns brought to the font for baptism, and the last prayers over bodies wrapped in linen. The font and the bier stand not far apart, and in the memory of this place, the same names are often recorded in both. I have seen such nearness before, in ages far older than this one, in settlements of clay and reed, in towns built of marble and mosaic. Always the two rites stand close together, as though to remind those who live that the loom never stops, that for every beginning, an ending waits. The people understand this, though they do not always speak of it. To name death too often is to invite it, and so they speak instead of the seasons, of the harvest, of the weather's temper. Yet it is there, always present, like a shadow you see only when you turn your head. In the lane, a child runs past me, clutching a wooden hoop and laughing. His cheeks are flushed, his voice bright, the sound of his feet light on the packed earth. He is the brother of the infant in the cottage, though he does not yet know the weight his mother carries in her heart for both of them. For him, the world is solid and sure, each day promised without question. And perhaps that is how it must be, for if the young were to live with the knowledge the elders carry, the wheel of life would turn less easily. By evening, the grave will be ready. A small crowd will gather, the air heavy with the scent of turned earth. The priest will speak words meant to comfort, though they comfort only in the way an old truth does, by reminding those who remain that this is how it has always been. The body will be lowered into the ground, the sound of soil striking wood soft but final. And then the living will return to their hearths, their fields, their children, to the work of keeping the other threads from breaking. The loom will continue its weaving. Birth will come again, as certain as the winter's frost and the summer's bloom. And death will come again, as it always has, waiting with patience for its turn at the shuttle. Life here is built from 1,000 movements of the hands, each one small enough to seem unremarkable. Yet together they form the wall that keeps hunger and want at bay. Every household turns the wheel of its own survival, and if one spoke falters, the wheel threatens to stop. In the dim interior of a cottage, a woman kneels by the hearth, a low clay bowl resting on the floor beside her. Her hands are deep in dough, pushing and folding with a rhythm as steady as breath. The coarse flour leaves a dusting on her forearms, and the scent of yeast lingers in the warm air. She works without hurry, but without pause. Bread must be made every day, for it is the anchor of every meal. Outside, a man bends over a length of fishing net, the twine rough against his fingers. He moves carefully, threading new cord through the gaps where last week's work has torn. His hands know the pattern without the guidance of his eyes. They have done this through every season, in frost and in rain, when the fingers grow numb and when the sweat makes the twine slippery. The repaired net will be cast in the river at first light tomorrow. Further along the lane, an old woman sits with a basket in her lap, peeling onions for drying. The sharp scent rises, making her eyes water, though she does not stop. Winter is months away, but the work of winter begins now. She hums a tune as she works, not for company, but because it keeps the hands steady, the mind fixed on the task rather than the long cold to come. At the edge of the green, a boy leads a small, shaggy pony toward the fields. Strapped across the animal's back are 2 sacks of grain, heavy enough to make the creature shift under the weight. The boy's bare feet sink into the damp soil, but he moves forward without complaint. The grain is for the mill, and the flour will be for bread, and the bread will be for life. In a shaded yard, A cooper is at work shaping staves for a barrel. His knife shaves curls of wood that fall at his feet, releasing the scent of fresh oak. A sound rings out with each blow of his mallet, the music of wood and iron meeting, until the staves fit neatly together, ready to hold ale or salted meat. A poorly made barrel leaks. A sound one preserves its contents for months. Here, the difference between one and the other is the difference between a full belly in March and an empty one. I walk past these scenes, hearing the rustle of linen drying on a line, the thud of an axe into a log, the swish of water poured from bucket to trough. There is no hour in the day when nothing is done. Even the moments of rest, the leaning against a doorway, the standing to watch geese cross the stream, are filled with quiet assessments. How much would remain stacked, how many eggs the hens have laid, how soon the sheep must be moved to fresh pasture. There is no coin spent here without thought, no grain of salt used without care. Every resource is counted, not in numbers but in needs. How many mouths to feed, how many days until the next market, how long until the first frost might creep across the garden. The body is the first and most necessary tool. If a back seizes or a wrist swells, if an eye clouds or a foot turns beneath its weight, the loss is felt as sharply as a broken cartwheel. Work can be shared among neighbors for a day, perhaps a week, but no one can carry another's labor forever. That is why the health of each person is guarded so fiercely, even if the means of guarding it are simple. A rest under a tree when the sun grows too strong, a poultice laid against a sore joint, a blessing spoken quietly at the threshold. In the fields beyond the last cottage, men and women move through rows of growing barley. They stoop to pull weeds, their backs forming a low, swaying line against the pale gold of the grain. The air is filled with the scent of earth and the faint sound of insects moving between stalks. Above them, the sky is wide and empty but for a single slow-turning bird. I have seen this same labor under many suns. In lands of frozen fjords, of olive groves, of desert wind, the shapes of the tools may differ, the crops may change, yet the work, the endless, necessary tending of life, remains the same. It binds all who live close to the land, no matter the century or the kingdom that claims it. When the light begins to fade, the village does not stop. It shifts. Buckets are rinsed and set upside down by the well. The day's dough is shaped and placed near the fire to rise. The animals are led into their pens, the gates tied shut against the night. Children carry in the last of the kindling, stacking it near the hearth where it will be dry and ready come morning. These tasks may seem small, even forgettable, yet they are the threads that hold the fabric of life together. Without them, the weave loosens, the pattern frays, and once it begins to unravel, it is difficult to draw the strands back into place. The sun slips lower, brushing the cottages with a light that turns their walls to gold. In that light, the tools lean against doorways like sentinels, waiting for the morning. The work will begin again tomorrow and the next day, and for as many days as the body will allow. In this way, survival is not a single act, but a long, unbroken chain of effort, each link forged by hand, by will, and by the quiet refusal to let the thread break. The day thins gently into evening, like a candle burning low but steady. Shadows stretch across the green, lengthening from the cottages and garden walls until they meet in the center, softening the edges of the world. The air cools, carrying with it the mingled sense of earth, wood smoke, and the first hint of night's dampness. One by one, the sounds of labor fall away. The last strokes of the cooper's mallet fade. The thud of the axe ceases. The women at the well draw their final buckets, the rope creaking as it winds back into place. The village exhales in unison, a slow release of the day's weight. In the lanes, children still linger, reluctant to be called indoors. Their games have shifted to those that suit the dwindling light, chasing fireflies, balancing on low fences, daring one another to run across the green before the dark swallows it. Bare feet stir the dust, and laughter rings in short, bright bursts, like the last sparks from a dying ember. A woman stands in the doorway of her cottage, arms folded, a faint smile softening the lines of her face. She calls a name, not loudly, but with the tone that brooks no delay, and a boy emerges from the gathering dusk, clutching a small bundle of sticks. The door closes behind them with a gentle thud. Smoke rises from every chimney now, its blue threads curling upward into the cooling sky. The scent of pottage thickens in the air. Onions, herbs, perhaps a scrap of salted pork if the household is fortunate. Somewhere, bread bakes on the hearthstone, its crust hardening, the smell deep and comforting. In another house, a pot of milk is warmed, ready to be mixed with honey for a child before sleep. In the fields beyond, a shepherd moves among his flock, his dark figure barely visible against the fading gold of the grass. The sheep cluster together, their quiet bleats carrying on the still air. Soon they will be gathered into the pen, safe from the night's unseen wanderers, the fox in the hedgerow, the dog gone half wild. Inside the cottages, lamplight begins to bloom. It spills from small windows in soft, golden shapes, lying across the lane like patches of warmth. The light is not wasted. A single candle or rushlight is often enough for a family to sit together, mending clothes, carving spoons, or telling the day's stories. Shadows sway gently on the walls, keeping time with the flicker of the flame. I walk past one such home and hear the low murmur of voices. A child's laughter slips through the shutters, followed by the deeper tone of an elder telling a tale. The words are too quiet to catch, but the rhythm is familiar, the slow, deliberate pace of stories meant to be savored. Perhaps it is a tale of the saints, or of the old kings, or of a fox clever enough to outwit the hounds. It will end as such stories always do, with a lesson wrapped carefully in the folds of the telling. Farther along the lane, a man sits alone on a low bench outside his door. His hands rest on his knees, and his gaze is fixed on the horizon, where the last strip of light clings stubbornly to the edge of the world. Perhaps he is thinking of the next day's work, or of someone buried in the churchyard, or of nothing at all. In this stillness, thought and silence feel much the same. The church bell does not toll at this hour. Instead, the evening is marked by the natural turning of the light. The sky deepens to a blue so rich it feels almost tangible, and the first stars prick through, hesitant at first, then with greater certainty. The mist begins to gather again, sliding in low from the meadows, softening the shapes of the cottages until they seem to float above the ground. By now, the lanes are empty. Doors are bolted, shutters drawn, fires banked for the night. The village lies wrapped in its own warmth, the day's labor spent, the fragile thread of life unbroken for another turn of the sun. There is no feast, no celebration, only the quiet satisfaction of having made it to the end of the day without loss. Here, that is mercy enough. I linger for a moment longer, listening to the hush settle like a blanket. Somewhere, an owl calls from the hedgerow, its voice low and steady. In the distance, a dog answers, then falls silent. The stars brighten, and the mist thickens, and the village sleeps, its breath rising and falling like that of a single living being. In the morning, the pattern will begin again. The same steps, the same tools, the same hopes and fears woven into the fabric of the day. And each evening, the question will be answered anew. Did the thread hold? Tonight it has, and that is enough. The day may begin in brightness, yet there is always a shadow walking just behind it. In this age, illness is not an uncommon visitor. It lives among the people, a constant presence that may lie quiet for weeks, even months, before stirring again. It can arrive as a faint chill in the bones on a summer's evening, or as a heaviness in the chest after working in the rain. Sometimes it shows itself in the sudden flush of fever, the skin damp and hot, the eyes clouded and distant. The people know these signs well. They have seen them take hold of neighbors, of kin, of themselves. There are names for the ailments, though they are as much descriptions as they are diagnoses. The ague, a shaking fever that grips the body, leaving the sufferer shivering beneath layers of wool even as sweat runs down their face. Some say it comes from damp air rising off marshes, others from foul winds that creep in at night. The truth, that it rides in the bite of unseen insects, lies far in the future, beyond the reach of this village. Then there is consumption, a sickness of slow theft. The cough begins dry, almost polite, before deepening into something that rattles the chest. Weeks pass, and the body grows lean, the cheeks hollowing, the eyes taking on a brightness that is not health but the fever's strange light. The village has seen many taken by it, though none can say why some live and others fade. The flux, a cruel sickness of the stomach, can strip a body of its strength in days. A man strong enough to carry a beam alone on Monday may not rise from his bed by Thursday. The water drawn from the well may carry it, though the villagers do not yet suspect. They speak instead of spoiled food, of a curse laid by an ill-wisher, of God's testing hand. Children are the most vulnerable. A small fever can turn in a night, leaving the body still and cold by morning. Mothers watch with a careful eye for any change in their little ones. The flush on the cheek, the unusual quietness, the refusal to eat. There is no sure remedy, only the hope that the illness will pass as quietly as it came. And yet, not all sickness is sudden. Many live with aches that never fully fade. Joints stiff from years of work, old injuries that swell in the damp. These pains are as much a part of life as the turning of the seasons. They are not fought against, but endured, managed with warming salves or the comfort of the hearth's heat. I have walked through the lanes of this village in every season and seen the signs. A man leaning longer than usual on his hoe in the field. A woman pausing to press her side before lifting her bucket. A child whose eyes seem too tired for their years. These are the quiet marks of affliction, the ways sickness weaves itself into the fabric of the day without stopping its pattern. And when a sickness comes in earnest, it is not hidden. The sound of coughing drifts from shuttered windows. A door remains closed for days, the smoke from its chimney thinning. Neighbors leave bread or broth at the threshold, knocking only lightly before turning away. Some will stop at the church to light a candle for the afflicted, the flame burning as both plea and surrender. A hope that mercy will be granted, and an acceptance if it is not. This is the way of life here. Illness is not an enemy to be conquered, but a force to be endured, like a storm or a harsh winter. Comes, it stays, it passes, or it does not. And when it does not, the village gathers, as it has always gathered, to bear witness and to carry the thread forward for those who can no longer hold it. In the heart of the village, in a cottage marked by bundles of dried herbs hanging from its eaves, lives the healer. She is not a physician, for no such person serves here, nor does she wear the robe of a monk. She is simply the one to whom people come when the body falters, when the breath grows short, when the skin feels as if fire and ice run together beneath it. Her table is a world in miniature, a map of the village's knowledge of sickness and recovery. It is worn smooth by decades of use, its surface darkened with the stains of boiled plants and pressed roots. Jars of honey, thick and golden, stand beside small bowls of vinegar so sharp it makes the nose wrinkle. Sprigs of dried rosemary and sage lie in neat bundles, their scent mingling with that of chamomile and mint. Some remedies are for soothing, some for drawing out heat, others for closing a wound. There are strips of soft wool for bandaging, linen cloths for poultices, beeswax for sealing salves against the air. In one corner rests a mortar and pestle, its stone worn shallow from years of grinding leaves into paste. The healer moves with deliberate care. She knows which plants to gather in the morning and which at dusk, which roots to dig after the first frost and which to take before the ground hardens. Some she keeps whole, others she steeps in warmed wine or crushes into powders. There is a rhythm to her work, the quiet turning of hands and mind in a cycle as old as memory. When a patient arrives, she begins with touch and sight. A hand to the forehead, fingers tracing the pulse at the wrist, eyes scanning the tongue's color, the way the chest rises and falls. There is no written list of symptoms here, only the knowledge carried in the healer's own body from years of tending to others. She believes, as many do, that sickness can come from imbalances within as well as from the air without. A body too full of heat must be cooled. One too cold must be warmed. Herbs and food are chosen accordingly. Cooling mint for fever, warming ginger for a chill. Honey for the throat, vinegar for the stomach. But not all her tools are of earth and plant. At the head of her table rests a small carved box, within which lie relics. A sliver of bone said to be from a saint, a strip of cloth once blessed at a holy shrine. These are brought out when the sickness seems beyond the reach of herb or salve. For the people believe that healing comes from both God and the land, and it is wise to ask for both. The air in the healer's cottage is always thick with scent. Not unpleasant, but heavy, as if the walls themselves have absorbed years of boiling sage and thyme. Light filters in through a small window, falling across the table in a golden patch where dust motes drift like tiny, slow-turning seeds. Sometimes the healer works in silence, listening only to the breath of the one she tends. Other times she murmurs prayers as her hands move, the words soft enough to be mistaken for a lullaby. The sick often close their eyes at the sound, whether or not the prayer itself holds meaning for them. When she finishes, she sends her patients away with small bundles: a cloth tied with dried leaves to steep in hot water, a pot of thick salve, a flask of wine infused with bitter roots. They are told when to take it, how much to drink, what to avoid in the meantime. The rest is a matter of time, and of the body's own will to mend. Not all who come to her return to their homes. There are those who arrive too late, whose sickness has already set its roots deep. For them, the healer's work changes. The herbs are chosen not to cure but to ease, to quiet the cough, to soften the pain, to make the last days more bearable. I have seen many such tables across the centuries. Some were in great halls lined with books, others in low tents on muddy fields. Some bore silver instruments, others only stone and wood. Yet the heart of the work was always the same. The hands moving with patience, the eyes searching for signs of change, the mind carrying the memory of every recovery and every loss. In this village, the healer's table is as much a part of the life of the people as the well or the church. It is where they bring their hope, their fear, their trust in the fragile thread that ties them to the days ahead. The door opens with care, as if even the sound might disturb the quiet within. The air inside is still, heavy with the mingled scents of boiled sage, damp wool, and the faint metallic tang of fever. Light is scarce. The shutters are drawn to keep away the wind, and what little seeps through the cracks is softened, dulled. Shadows rest in the corners like sleeping animals. In the bed by the hearth lies the patient, propped on a mound of straw-filled pillows. The linen beneath them is worn thin, smoothed by many washings. The blanket is drawn to the chin, yet the face above it glistens with sweat. The eyes open briefly, unfocused, before slipping shut again. Each breath is a measured effort, the chest rising in small, shallow movements, as though each one must be coaxed from the body. Beside the bed, a low stool serves as a table. On it rests a clay cup, a wooden spoon, and a small pot from which steam no longer rises. The pot's rim is stained green from the herbs steeped within, a bitter mixture meant to draw the heat from the body. A cloth, damp from its last soaking, lies folded and ready to be placed against the brow. A woman, the patient's wife, perhaps, or a sister, moves quietly between the hearth and the bed. She tends the fire with practiced hands, knowing just how much wood to place so that the warmth will linger without stifling. Her movements are slow, careful, as though the air around the bed is fragile, likely to shatter at the wrong step. Every so often, she dips the cloth into a bowl of cool water, wrings it out, and lays it gently across the patient's forehead. Her touch is not hurried. She lingers for a moment, fingers brushing the temple, feeling for any change in the heat. The act is both care and measurement, love and watchfulness intertwined. From the rafters above, bunches of dried herbs hang: rosemary, sage, lavender, their scents mingling with the smoke from the fire. Some will be boiled for drinking, others burned to scent the air. The people here believe that certain smells can drive out illness, carrying it away on the rising smoke. Whether it is truth or hope hardly matters. In the sickroom, both serve the same purpose. At the foot of the bed rests a small carved cross, its wood darkened by years of handling. A candle burns beside it, its flame steady despite the draft that slips in whenever the door opens. It casts a pool of gold on the blanket, a light that holds its ground against the gray of the room. From time to time, a neighbor steps quietly inside, leaving a loaf of bread or a flask of warmed ale by the door. Words are few, for speech feels heavy here. A nod, A glance toward the bed, a murmured blessing. Then the door closes again, and the stillness settles back into place. The patient stirs once, opening their eyes enough to look toward the woman. A faint sound escapes their lips, half a word, perhaps a name. She leans close to hear, nods, and whispers something in return. Whatever was spoken, it seems to ease them. The tension in the brow smooths, and the eyes close once more. I have stood in countless sickrooms across the centuries, and the weight within them is always the same. It is not only the weight of illness, but of waiting to see which way the balance will tip, whether the body will return to the labor of living or yield to the stillness that has already crept close. The hours here pass slowly, marked not by the turning of the sun but by the tasks at hand. Cooling the fever, coaxing the patient to sip broth, replacing the damp cloth, murmuring prayers. Each action is a thread laid into the fabric of care, each repetition a quiet act of defiance against the illness. And yet, there is no promise that such care will be enough. The people of this age know this well. They have seen the same efforts fail before, seen them succeed just as often without knowing why. Perhaps that is why they give themselves fully to the tending, so that when the outcome is known, they may say with truth that nothing more could have been done. The light in the room shifts slowly as evening draws near, the single candle becoming brighter in contrast to the deepening shadows. Outside, life in the village continues. The sound of a cart's wheels, the call of a shepherd, the distant laughter of children. But here, time holds still, gathered in the space between each breath. The woman settles herself on a stool by the bed, the cloth resting once more across the patient's brow. Her eyes stay fixed on the face before her, searching for signs. A deepening of the breath, a loosening of the grip on the blanket, the faintest murmur of speech. She will watch through the night, rising only to tend the fire or fetch fresh water, her own weariness held at bay by the will to keep vigil. In this room, the thread of life stretches thin, yet it still holds. And for now, that is enough. Even when the fields are green and the air is warm, there is another season that lingers in the minds of the people. A season without sunlight, born not of the sky but of the body. Its name is not spoken often, for the memory of it is like an ember. Stir it, and it flares too brightly. Yet it is there, always, beneath the surface of the day. The village has known its share of such shadows. Old ones speak of the plague, though many who survived it now rest in the churchyard. It came without warning, carried not by horse or cart but by the very air, or so it seemed. One day the lanes were filled with the sound of work, the next with the silence of shuttered doors. A cough, a swelling, a sudden fever, and then the end, swift as a summer storm. Even now, decades later, there are marks that speak of those days. In the churchyard, the graves from that time lie closer together, as if the earth could not be dug fast enough. Some stones bear only a cross, no name, for there were too many dead and too few left to carve the words. In the cottages, a few still keep sprigs of rosemary above the lintel, a habit from when they believed the scent would keep sickness at bay. Not all shadows come as suddenly as the plague. There is the sweating sickness, which can seize a man before the sun has set on the same day he first feels it. Strong bodies, well-fed and used to labor, could be laid low in hours, their skin damp, their breath ragged. Few dared to tend the sick closely for fear of joining them in the grave. Some who walked in the morning were carried out by evening. And there is leprosy, slower, quieter, but no less feared. Those afflicted were marked not only by the illness but by the distance it forced upon them. Whispers would follow them. Children would be called indoors at their passing. Some were sent away to live in houses set apart, where they could tend their wounds among others like themselves. For them, the sickness was not only of the body but of the heart, for it stripped them of the touch and presence of those they loved. The memory of these afflictions shapes how the village meets even the smallest illness. A fever in summer stirs unease in the elders, who recall too well how quickly it can spread. A cough in winter draws glances, not unkind, but measuring, as if weighing the risk. The healer's door will see more visitors in such days, bringing herbs not just for themselves but for their neighbors, hoping to keep the sickness from gaining ground. The people do not speak of these shadows as tragedies, though they were that. They speak of them as seasons, times to be endured, survived if possible, mourned if not. In their telling, there is always a rhythm. The coming of sickness, the long days of its reign, the slow return of life. The ending is never sudden. It fades like mist, leaving behind the changed shapes of those who remain. I have seen villages where these shadows have fallen more than once, in cycles too long for any one life to hold, yet short enough for memory to keep. In each, the same patterns emerge. The closing of doors, the quiet prayers, the marks left on the living as surely as on the dead. Some marks are carried in the body, the limp from an illness that weakened the bones, the cloud in an eye after a fever. Others are carried in the mind, the habit of keeping extra grain stored away, the wariness at strangers arriving unannounced. And yet, in every place, I have also seen the same return of laughter, the same stubborn blooming of joy in the seasons that follow. The shadows do not erase the light. They only remind the people to cherish it while it lasts. The rosemary remains above the door not just as a guard, but as a sign that the house has stood through the storm. In the village tonight, the air is calm, the lanes quiet, but in the pause between footsteps, I can feel it. The echo of other nights when fear moved just as silently, when doors closed against it, and the people waited, as they always have, for the shadow to pass. There is a certain heaviness in the air on some days, not the weight of weather, but of something less easily seen. In the minds of the villagers, this heaviness can carry sickness. They believe that foul air miasma is a silent messenger of disease, moving invisibly through lanes and over fields, slipping through shutters and under doors. It is an old belief, older than the stone of the church, older than the plowed furrows in the meadow. The healer will tell you that when the air smells foul, it must be cleansed or sweetened, for illness lingers in bad scents as mold clings to damp wood. The scent of decay from a midden heap, the sharp stench of stagnant water, the reek of a dead animal hidden in the hedgerow, all are cause for unease. The villagers have their ways of guarding against it. Bundles of dried herbs are hung above doorways and in windows, rosemary, lavender, rue. Their scents drift slowly into the rooms, a steady whisper of green and spice. In the cold months, small pans of vinegar are left on window ledges, its sharpness thought to bite the foulness out of the air. On certain days, the church burns incense until its sweet smoke rolls out into the lanes, curling into doorways, clinging to clothing and hair. Inside the homes, the hearth is not only for cooking. Some families place small branches of juniper or rosemary into the embers, letting the smoke drift upward to fill the room. The air grows thick with the scent, and the people breathe it in as a kind of shield, believing it will keep the sickness from finding a place to settle. When word comes of illness in a neighboring village, people here grow more careful. Windows are kept shut even in the warmth, doors closed quickly behind any who pass through. The air inside grows close, heavy with the mingled sense of cooking and smoke, but they bear it without complaint. Better a stifling room than the creeping breath of sickness. Even the well is not free from suspicion. On mornings when the air feels strange, too still, too damp, carrying a smell no one can quite name, the water drawn from it is eyed warily. Some will boil it, others will fetch their water from a stream farther off, believing that flowing water is less likely to carry the ill humors of the air. I have walked in places where the air truly did bear death, though the people of those times could not see the tiny forms that traveled within it. In their absence of knowledge, they made poetry of protection. The hanging herbs, the scented smoke, the bells rung to stir the air. And though these charms could not always halt the sickness, they gave a sense of action, of resistance, that was itself a kind of medicine. In the evenings, when the sun has set and the mist gathers low, the villagers sometimes remark on the smell of the earth. If it is sweet, they say the land is well. If it is sour, they take it as a warning. I have watched them pause in their doorways, breathing in the night as if testing its weight before stepping into it. Tonight, the air lies gentle over the village, carrying only the sense of wood smoke and damp grass. But the rosemary still hangs over the doors. The juniper still waits in the hearth. The vinegar still rests in shallow dishes by the windows. Old habits do not vanish, for the people know that sickness, like the changing wind, can come without warning. In this way, the air is never simply empty space. It is a vessel capable of carrying both life and death. And so the people live within it as one might live beside a deep, unseen river, respectful, cautious, always aware of its silent flow. At the center of the village stands the well, a ring of weathered stone worn smooth by generations of hands. Its rope is frayed in places, the wooden bucket darkened by years of use. The well is as vital to the life of the village as the hearth is to the home. Without it, there would be no bread, no ale, no quenching of thirst after a day's work. Yet what gives life can also steal it, quietly, without a ripple to show its intent. The water drawn here is clear to the eye, cool to the touch. But clarity is no promise of safety. There are days when the people murmur that the taste is not right, when the air above the well carries a faint, sour scent. Such whispers pass quickly, for the well must be used whether or not the water is perfect. There is no other that lies so near, and walking miles for water is a burden not easily added to the day. I have watched the women come in the gray of morning, their wooden yokes resting across their shoulders, buckets swinging from the ends. They lower the bucket carefully, hearing the soft splash as it meets the water far below, feeling the rope grow heavier as it draws the gift upward. A squeak of wood on wood marks the bucket's rise, a sound as familiar as the toll of the church bell. Yet the same rope that carries the bucket may also carry the dust of the lane, the droppings of birds, the touch of many hands. Rain may wash dirt into the well. A dead rat fallen into its depths can taint the water for weeks. These things are seldom seen, and so they are seldom spoken of, but they are known in the way that all old dangers are known. To guard against such ills, some households boil the water before drinking. The taste changes, flat, less fresh, but the fear of sickness is stronger than the desire for sweetness. Others steep herbs in it, rosemary or mint, believing the scent will drive away the hidden harm. The healer, when asked, will speak of humors and vapors, of the need to keep the water light and not heavy. She advises that the bucket be kept clean, that the rope be mended when frayed, that the well be covered in times of storm. And when an illness sweeps through the village, her eyes often turn toward the well, as if questioning whether the water itself has taken sides against the people. I have stood beside wells in many lands, in stone courtyards where they were shaded by olive trees, in desert towns where their mouths were lined with clay, in frozen villages where the water had to be broken free from ice. Always, there is the same mingling of gratitude and wariness. For water is not only a gift but a keeper of secrets, and those secrets can rise to the surface without warning. On certain mornings, when mist clings to the grass and the air is still, the water in the bucket seems to hold a mirror to the sky. The villagers glance into it as they carry it home, seeing not their own faces but a reflection of clouds, or a sliver of moon, or the slow turn of a bird overhead. In such moments, it is easy to forget that what looks pure may hold unseen harm. But the people do not forget for long. They remember the fever that spread 2 winters past, when half the village was struck down. Some say it came from the river, others from the well. The truth is lost, and perhaps it does not matter, for the danger remains, no matter its source. So the women walk with their buckets, the rope squeaks, the water splashes against the wood, and life continues. The well stands as it always has, holding within it both life and the possibility of loss, as steady and silent as the earth that surrounds it. Bread is the heart of every meal here, the one food without which no household can stand. Each morning, the smell of it drifts from cottage to cottage, warm, yeasty, comforting. It is a scent that speaks of safety and sustenance. Yet, like water, bread can carry its own shadow. The grain from which it is made is harvested in the bright days of summer, threshed and stored against the long winter ahead. But the field does not always yield perfection. Sometimes the season is too wet, and the heads of barley or rye darken before the reaping. Sometimes they are touched by a creeping mold, black dust clinging where there should be pale gold. These signs are often brushed away or ground in with the rest, for waste is a luxury no one can afford. It is from such grain that a more insidious danger comes, the bitter sickness. In years when the mold, called ergot, clings thick to the rye, those who eat the bread made from it may feel its hidden sting. At first, it is only a tingling in the fingers or a strange heaviness in the limbs. But soon, the hands grow numb, the legs will not obey, the skin burns as if set alight. Some speak of visions, of colors too bright to be real, of shapes moving in the corners of the eye. The people do not know the cause. Some say it is a curse laid by an ill-wisher, others that it is a test from God. There are whispers of the holy fire that consumes from within, a name given to both the pain and the strange rapture that comes to those caught in its grip. The afflicted may recover in days, or they may never walk again. Even without the mold, bread can carry risk. If the grain has been stored in damp, it may spoil unseen, the rot hidden until it is baked. Sometimes a loaf, left too long, grows spots of green or white, yet still it is eaten when hunger presses. The bitterness in the mouth is ignored for the sake of filling the belly. The miller's work, too, plays a part in safety. His stones must be kept clean, his sacks dry. A careless miller can spread the spoil of one sack into all the flour he grinds that day. And yet, the people rely on him, trusting that the bread they eat will sustain rather than harm. In the baking, there is a small measure of protection. The heat of the hearth may kill what is weakest in the grain, but it cannot undo what has already been woven into its flesh. The crust may crack beautifully, the scent may fill the room, and still, danger may lie hidden in the crumb. I have seen bread break both famine and the body. In years of plenty, it is a blessing. In years of poor harvest, it becomes a gamble. A loaf may feed a family for a day, or it may leave them doubled over before nightfall. And yet, no one here will give it up. It is the thread on which their lives hang. In the quiet of the morning, when the loaves are set to cool on the windowsill, they look harmless enough, simple, humble shapes, each one a promise of the day ahead. But those who have lived through the bitter sickness do not look on bread without a certain wariness, remembering the way its gift can turn against the hand that takes it. So the loaves are sliced, the butter spread, the crumbs gathered from the table, and the risk is accepted. For here, as in all places I have walked, survival is a matter not of avoiding every danger, but of living with the ones that cannot be cast aside. Meat, when it appears on the table, is a gift. For most in the village, it is not a daily fare, nor even a weekly one. A hen might be stewed on a feast day, a rabbit trapped in the hedgerow, a pig slaughtered before the deep of winter. But such gifts are fleeting. Without the chill of ice houses or the stillness of glass jars, the life of fresh meat is short, and in that shortness lies its danger. When an animal is killed, the work begins at once. The flesh must be cut, salted, smoked, or eaten before it turns. Salt is the most common ally, coarse and pale, drawn from trade with distant coasts or scraped from inland beds. It is rubbed deep into the meat, working into every fold, drawing out the moisture where rot begins its slow work. Yet salt is costly, and not all can afford to use it as freely as they should. Smoking offers another way. Over the hearth, meat is hung on wooden hooks, where the steady breath of the fire dries and seasons it. The smoke weaves into its fibers, a cloak against spoilage. The smell of it lingers in the rafters, in the clothes, even in the hair of those who tend the fire. Still, smoke is no perfect guard. In damp weather, mold may creep over the surface, and a single slip in tending the fire can leave the meat unprotected. In the warmer months, danger quickens. A piece of meat left too long will sour, the scent turning from rich to sharp to foul. Flies find it quickly, laying their eggs in folds of flesh where the knife has passed. Such spoilage can begin in hours, unseen until the first bite brings a taste that is wrong, metallic, bitter, or sour in a way that speaks of sickness. Yet hunger is a persuasive voice. I have watched families cut away what seems spoiled and eat the rest, trusting that the danger is gone with the discarded piece. Sometimes they are right. Other times the sickness comes all the same. The cramping of the belly, the fever that follows, the long days of weakness. There are subtler dangers too. Some meats carry illness in their own blood, invisible to sight or scent. Pork, if undercooked, can bring a wasting sickness that hollows the body from within. The people do not know the word for it, but they know the signs: the slow decline, the unshakable fatigue, the aching joints. Even the act of butchery carries its risks. A cut from the knife, small and forgotten in the press of work, may fester in the days that follow. Without clean water or knowledge of unseen invaders, such wounds can swell, redden, and carry fever through the body. A feast day's preparation has more than once ended with a man laid low, not from what he ate, but from what touched his skin. In the colder months, the earth itself aids preservation. Cellars dug deep into the ground hold meat longer, their damp chill slowing the invisible rot. In some places, meat is wrapped in cloth and buried for a time, trusting the cold soil to keep it safe. It is not a perfect safeguard, but it gives the people a little more time before hunger forces a choice between eating and discarding. I have seen grand halls where roasted meats filled the tables, steaming and fragrant, and I have seen huts where a single strip of salted pork was shared among many. In both, the same truth lingers. Meat is both treasure and risk, its gift tied to the skill and care of those who keep it. Tonight, in the village, a thin smoke curls from the chimney of a low thatched cottage. Inside, strips of venison hang in the warm haze, turning slowly as the fire burns beneath them. The smell is rich and mouth-watering, but the family will not taste it for days yet. It is for the winter ahead, when the land lies still and the fields give no grain, and hunger presses with a sharper hand than caution. The river lies just beyond the far meadow, winding through alder and willow before slipping quietly out of sight. It is older than the village, older than the road, older even than the standing stones on the hill. For as long as anyone can remember, it has been both friend and foe. In summer, its waters run clear, cool enough to soothe the hands after a day's work in the fields. Children wade in its shallows, chasing darting fish, their laughter carrying across the grass. Women kneel at its edge to wash linen, beating the cloth against smooth stones, the water carrying away the suds in swirls of white. The river is a place of gathering, of labor, and of rest. It feeds the people, too. Small fish, dace, roach, and trout, are caught with woven baskets or hooked lines, their silver bodies flashing in the light before they are carried home. In spring, the eels run thick, twisting through the shallows, easy to trap and rich enough to salt for the winter months. In lean years, these catches have kept the village from hunger. But the river keeps other, less welcome gifts. It carries the runoff from the fields, the droppings of animals that wander to drink, the refuse of other villages upstream. After heavy rains, the water runs clouded with silt and more than silt, and the fish that live in it are not always safe to eat. Illness has been known to follow a catch from such waters, the belly cramping, the skin growing hot, the breath shallow. The people know, too, that the river can take as easily as it gives. In spring, when the snows melt in the hills, the current swells, dark and swift. The banks crumble underfoot, and the water rises into the meadow, carrying away anything left too close. A tool, a sheep, a child unwary of its strength. More than one family here remembers the name of someone taken by the flood. In the warmer months, when the flow slows, green weeds grow thick along its edges. The water there grows warm, still, and heavy-smelling. It is said that the mists that rise from it in the evening can carry sickness into the lungs. Whether or not that is true, the villagers avoid the bank on such nights, keeping their doors closed until morning. Even so, the river is never shunned entirely. It is too necessary, too much a part of life. Some households draw water from it when the well runs low, trusting that boiling will keep harm at bay. Others use it to soak flax, to soften the fibers for spinning, or to water their gardens in dry weeks. In all things, there is a careful balance, a watchfulness born from knowing that the same hand that feeds can strike. I have seen rivers far greater than this one, with ships that rode their currents like kings, carrying grain and spices between cities. And I have seen rivers so small they could be stepped across, yet still they carried the same double nature, the gift of life and the risk of loss. This one, modest though it may be, holds both in equal measure. Tonight, it lies quiet under the rising moon, the water catching the silver light in broken ripples. Somewhere upstream, an owl calls. Downstream, the reeds shift as something moves among them. Perhaps a fish, perhaps nothing more than the current finding a new path. The village sleeps, the river keeps its course, and between them, the thread of life holds, thin but unbroken. Life here is lived on a narrow path, though most walk it without thinking. On one side lies sustenance, the food, the drink, the very air that keeps the body upright. On the other side lies sickness, waiting for a misstep so small it may not even be seen. The people do not name this path. They do not speak of it over their bread or beside the well, yet they know it in their bones. It is why they sniff the water before drinking, why they glance at the crust of a loaf before cutting, why they turn away from the riverbank on misty nights. These small, almost unconscious gestures are the stones they lay to keep their footing. Every household carries its own lore for survival. One family always boils water after the first frost, believing winter's bite drives hidden poisons into it. Another leaves a sliver of onion on the windowsill to draw out foul air. Bread is tested by scent and touch. Meat is judged by the firmness beneath the fingers, the color at the bone. None of these methods are perfect, but they are what the people have handed down from those who learned by hard trial. The dangers are rarely sudden. More often, they creep in, quiet as the settling of dust. A loaf that seemed fine at dawn brings cramps by nightfall. A jug of water drawn from the well leaves a fever in its wake. A piece of fish from the river, fat and sweet on the tongue, carries an illness that weakens the body for weeks. The harm is invisible until it is too late, and by then, the only defense is endurance. In such a world, trust is as much a necessity as the food itself. The miller must grind clean grain. The baker must tend the hearth well. The healer must choose herbs with care. The butcher must keep his knife sharp and his block clean. Each person's vigilance becomes part of the whole, a web that, if kept strong, may hold sickness at bay a little longer. And yet, even with all their care, the people accept that illness will come. They do not ask whether they will see it again, only when. This acceptance does not mean surrender. Rather, it shapes a kind of resilience. They rise each day, draw water, break bread, salt meat, tend the fire. They do these things knowing they walk the invisible edge, because the only other choice is to stop walking entirely. I have seen other ages where the dangers were named more precisely, where the unseen enemies were brought into view by glass and study. Yet even there, the same truth remained. The body lives by the grace of what it takes in, and what it takes in can betray it. Knowledge changes the shape of the path, but not the fact of it. Tonight, the village lies quiet beneath a low sky. The well stands silent. The bread rests cooling on the hearth. The river drifts past unseen. All seems safe. Yet the people know that this safety is as thin as the skin on cooling milk. A single stir, and it will break. They live with this knowledge not as a burden, but as a condition of life, and in doing so, they endure. Dawn comes quietly, the first light slipping over the thatched roofs and into the lanes. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint smoke of banked fires stirred awake. In the cottages, the day begins not with haste, but with the steady rhythm of work. For here, labor is not something set apart from life. It is life itself. The first burden of the day is often water. Before the bread is baked, before the animals are fed, before the fields call, someone must walk to the well. A yoke of wood rests across the shoulders, its weight made awkward by the swaying of empty buckets. The ground is uneven, the air still heavy with mist. By the time the buckets return, filled and sloshing, the shoulders already ache in the familiar way that marks the start of another day. Within the cottages, fires are coaxed into life from last night's embers. The work is careful, patient. A wisp of smoke, a curl of flame, the slow feeding of kindling until the heat grows strong enough for the day's cooking. The muscles of the hands and arms know this work well. They have shaped themselves to the small, precise motions of fire-making, to the rhythm of stirring and lifting. Those who tend animals are already at their tasks. Cows must be milked, their warm breath clouding the air in the chill. Goats bleat impatiently. Hens scatter at the sound of a door opening. The body bends, twists, stoops. Fingers grip, pull, and release. The back complains, but there is no time to heed it. The work must be done before the light grows too strong, before the fields demand their share of the day's strength. Children take on their own share of morning labor, fetching kindling, scattering grain for the hens, carrying small pails of water to where they are needed. Their steps are quick, their voices bright in the stillness, but even they feel the pull of the day's work on their limbs. They learn the motions early so that by the time they are grown, their bodies will move through them without thought. The smell of baking bread drifts from the hearth as the dough, kneaded by strong hands, begins to swell in the heat. Kneading is labor too, the push of the palms, the turn of the wrist, the weight of the dough resisting the motion. It is a slow, repetitive strength, different from the sharp pull of the bucket or the stoop to milk a cow, yet no less demanding. By the time the sun clears the treetops, the first burdens of the day are already behind them. Shoulders are warmed by the weight they have carried, arms by the tools they have lifted, backs by the bending they have endured. And though the morning has only just begun, the body is already marked by the quiet weariness of labor, the kind that does not end, but flows from one task to the next until the light fades again. This is the rhythm I have seen in countless places and centuries. The day's first work shaping not just the body, but the mind. It is work done without thought of ending, work that bends the body into a shape suited for survival, and in doing so, binds each day to the one before and the one to come. By the time the sun has risen high enough to warm the earth, the fields have already called their people to them. The land here is not generous without effort. It must be broken, turned, and coaxed into giving. And so the day stretches into the open air, the body set to tasks that draw on its deepest stores of strength. The plow is a heavy thing, its wooden frame worn smooth where hands have gripped it for years. It does not move of its own accord, even with the oxen straining in the harness. A steady hand must guide it, leaning into the handles, feeling the blade bite into the soil. The muscles in the shoulders and arms grow taut. The legs brace against the pull and jolt of uneven ground. Every furrow is earned, each one a straight scar through the dark earth. Behind the plowman, the turned soil gives off a scent rich and damp, the smell of life yet to come. The crows follow, their black shapes bobbing as they hunt for worms disturbed by the blade. The air is filled with the sound of the oxen's breathing, the creak of leather straps, the low, rhythmic calls meant to keep them steady. Others work with hoes and mattocks, breaking the clods the plow leaves behind. The bending is constant. A bow of the back, a swing of the arms, a straightening to stretch, and then down again. Hands grow raw from the handles, the palms ridged with blisters that will harden into callus before the season's end. Sowing follows, a gentler motion but no less demanding over time. A hand dips into the seed bag, scatters the grain in a practiced arc, steps forward, and scatters again. The movement is almost like breathing, in, out, until the arm aches from repetition and the bag hangs lighter against the hip. The sower's shadow drifts across the furrows, long in the morning, short by midday. The work does not pause for the sun's heat. When the light grows strong, a cloth is drawn over the head or a broad hat pulled low, but the body keeps moving. Sweat darkens the linen at the back and chest, dust clings to the skin, and the ache that began in the morning becomes a companion rather than a complaint. Even the children have their part in the fields. They gather stones from the furrows so the plow will not catch on them next season, or chase birds from the newly sown grain. The smaller ones bring jugs of water from the well, their bare feet quick along the paths worn between the cottages and the fields. By the time the sun begins its slow fall toward the horizon, the fields have changed shape. The neat lines of the furrows stretch away into the distance. The grain lies hidden beneath the soil, and the earth carries the imprint of a day's labor. The people, too, are marked. Their steps slower, their shoulders bowed, their hands stained with soil that no amount of washing will quite remove. I have seen the same pattern repeated across centuries and continents. The tools may change, iron instead of wood, harnesses shaped differently, but the body's work is the same. The land demands its due in sweat and strength, and in return, it offers the hope of a harvest. That hope is enough to bring them back each day, bending their backs and steadying their hands against the pull of the earth. The forest lies at the edge of the village, a tangle of oak and ash, beech and birch, where the light filters in thin green shafts. To the people here, it is more than a border. It is a storehouse of heat for the winter, a source of poles and beams, a place where the body learns the art of lifting, carrying, and enduring. In the early morning, the woodcutters set out with axes slung over their shoulders. The tools are heavy, their blades dark from oiling, their handles worn smooth by years of grip. Each man walks with a bundle of rope coiled at his side. For the woods yield not only logs but branches, kindling, and fallen limbs that can be bound and hauled. Felling a tree is slow, exacting work. The first strikes are sharp and quick, cutting into the bark until the pale wood beneath shows through. Then the rhythm settles. Lift, swing, bite, pull back. Lift, swing, bite, pull back. The arms burn, the shoulders grow tight, the breath comes heavier with each stroke. The sound carries far through the forest, echoing between the trunks like a measured drumbeat. When at last the tree begins to lean, there is a moment of silence, a breath held by all who watch before it falls. The crash is deep, a shaking of the ground, the snap of smaller branches breaking under its weight. The body feels the force even through the feet, a reminder of the strength contained in what has been taken down. Then comes the cutting, the stripping of branches, the sawing into lengths that can be carried. The saw bites with a different rhythm than the axe, a push and pull that draws on the back as much as the arms. Sweat runs into the eyes, the shirt clings to the skin, and the scent of sap and fresh cut wood rises in waves. For those gathering firewood, the work is no less demanding. They search for fallen branches, testing them for dryness, breaking them against a knee or with a well-placed step. The bundles grow heavy quickly, pressing into the shoulders and arms, the rope cutting into the palms. Every step back to the village is felt in the spine, in the thighs, in the steady pounding of the heart. There is danger in this work beyond the strain of muscle. A falling branch can break bone as easily as it snaps a twig. An axe that glances from the wood can bite into the leg that holds it steady. Even the simple act of carrying, one foot slipping on wet leaves, a bundle shifting suddenly, can leave a back or knee aching for weeks. Yet the people return to the woods again and again. Without the heat of a well-fed hearth, the winter would be more than discomfort. It would be a slow freezing of the life within the walls. Without timber, there would be no repair to cottages, no tools mended, no carts rebuilt. The body's effort here is an investment in survival, one measured in the steady weight of wood on the back. By the time the sun slips low, the forest edge is dotted with figures returning home, their loads balanced, their steps slow but steady. The smell of cut wood follows them, mingling with the scent of the evening's cooking. They will sleep heavily tonight, their bodies worn but satisfied in the knowledge that this day's labor has stored warmth for many nights to come. I have walked forests in many ages, seen the same posture in woodcutters 1,000 years apart. The slight lean forward, the arms curved inward to hold the load, the face set in quiet endurance. The trees may change, the tools may sharpen, but the weight of the woods is always the same, and the strength it calls for is eternal. Stone is the most stubborn of materials. It does not bend like wood, nor flow like water, nor give like earth. It must be persuaded into service, and persuasion here means force, the strength of back, the precision of hand, the endurance of every muscle from neck to heel. Quarrying begins in the half-light, before the sun can heat the rock. The quarrymen stand before the wall of stone with their picks and chisels, the air sharp with the scent of dust and mineral. The first blows ring loud, echoing off the cut faces of the quarry, scattering small chips into the dirt. Soon, the ringing becomes a rhythm, steady and unbroken, each strike loosening the bond between stone and earth. When a great block is freed, it does not leap willingly into motion. Levers are set against it, wedges driven beneath it, ropes tightened with the strain of many hands. The muscles in the arms stand out like corded rope, the legs brace against the ground, the breath grows harsh. The stone shifts grudgingly, each inch a victory. Once freed, it must be moved. Carts groan under the weight, their wheels reinforced with iron, their axles thick as a man's arm. The team pulling them strains forward, hooves digging into the earth, nostrils wide with effort. Men walk beside, pushing at the wheels when they catch, guiding the load around bends, bracing it against sudden slides. On steeper slopes, ropes are tied to trees, the descent slowed with the weight of men leaning back against the pull. In the village, the stone finds its new form. Masons take up their hammers and chisels, the sharp ring of metal on stone carrying through the air. Dust drifts from the blows, settling in hair, in beards, in the folds of tunics. The work is slow. A wall is built not in hours but in seasons. Each block must fit tight against its neighbor, the mortar spread and pressed until it binds. The shoulders ache from the lifting, the wrists from the shaping, the knees from the endless crouch and rise. Road building is harder still, for it demands not only stone but the shaping of the earth itself. Paths must be cleared, leveled, drained. Heavy stones are laid in beds of gravel, each one lifted, placed, and pounded into place. The work draws sweat in any season, whether under the weight of the summer sun or the biting wind of winter. Hands crack from the cold, backs stiffen from bending, feet grow sore from standing on the unyielding surface they are creating. This is labor that leaves its mark not just on the body, but on the land. Walls rise where once there was open space. Roads stretch where there was only mud. The people walk past these works with a certain pride, knowing that their own strength has been set into the bones of their home. The mason can point to a cornerstone and say, "I placed that." The road builder can walk its length and know where each stone lies because his own hands set it there. But pride does not ease the toll. The quarryman's back may never fully straighten. The mason's hands may stiffen in the cold, the joints swollen from years of holding tools. The road builder's knees may ache with every step long after the road is finished. These are the lasting imprints of stone on flesh, the body bearing in itself the memory of the work it has done. I have seen great cities rise from such toil, their cathedrals and fortresses reaching into the sky. And I have seen smaller works, a low wall to keep the sheep in, a bridge over a narrow stream, built with the same care, the same strain of muscle. In both, the labor is the same language, spoken in the rhythm of hammer and chisel, the groan of the cart, the slow, patient lifting of stone into place. When evening falls, the dust settles on the still air, and the quarry is silent again. But the walls stand taller than they did that morning. The road stretches a little farther, and the memory of the day's effort is pressed into the earth itself. When the day's work is done, the fields grow still, the forest edges darken, and the tools lie silent. Yet the labor lingers, not in the hands or the back alone, but in the entire shape of the people who live here. Their bodies are built from their work, each task carving strength into them as surely as a mason-shaped stone. In the dim light of evening, you can see it in the set of the shoulders, broad from lifting timber or guiding the plow. You can see it in the grip of a hand that has carried water every day since childhood, in the stance of someone accustomed to walking long distances under weight. Even in rest, they do not look idle. The memory of movement lies just beneath the surface. This strength is not the sudden kind born of sport or training alone. It is quiet, constant, built over years. The same muscles are called upon every day, their endurance stretched but never allowed to fade. There are no rest days in this rhythm, no long weeks of idleness. The land does not pause for the weary, and so the body learns to move even when tired, to lift even when sore, to bend and rise without thinking. With that strength comes a certain economy of motion. The reaper's scythe swings in an arc that wastes no effort. The woodcutter's axe falls at the precise angle to split the log cleanly. The water carrier walks with a steady pace that keeps the buckets from spilling. Each action is shaped not just by need, but by the wisdom of repetition, movements honed until they seem as natural as breathing. Yet even the strongest body here knows its limits. Injuries happen, and without skilled care, they can linger for years. A pulled muscle may heal crooked, leaving a limp. A fall can twist the back so that every morning begins with pain. But these too become part of the quiet strength, not the absence of weakness, but the ability to live alongside it. In the evenings, as the sun sinks and shadows stretch, people gather near their doorways or around the hearth. Their hands may be busy still, mending nets, weaving baskets, patching clothes, but their bodies rest in the slower rhythm of talk and stillness. It is here that the day's weariness becomes something shared, where the strain in one person's voice finds an echo in another's nod. I have walked among nobles who trained with sword and lance, their strength honed for moments of glory in the tilt-yard. I have walked among peasants whose strength was forged in the repetition of carrying, plowing, and building. And I tell you, the strength that endures is the quiet kind, the kind that lasts through seasons, through years, through the rise and fall of fortunes. In this village, no one will speak of their own strength. They will not weigh it or measure it or boast of it. But it is there in every door lintel lifted into place, in every furrow turned, in every cartload of stone hauled from the quarry. It is there in the way they rise each morning, no matter the aches of the night before, and take up once more the work that life demands. When night fully falls and the only sound is the crackle of the hearth or the sigh of the wind against the walls, the strength remains, silent now, at rest, but ready to be called upon again when dawn breaks. And so the labor of the body becomes the life of the body, and the life of the body becomes the quiet strength that carries it forward, day after day, year after year. It begins with a bell, not the solemn toll of the church, but a lighter, faster peal, carrying over the thatched roofs and along the narrow lanes. It is not the call to work or to worship, but to something rarer, a day of leisure, a feast day. The villagers know it at once, for the rhythm of the morning shifts. The buckets at the well are drawn more quickly, the animals fed with brisker hands. Soon, the green at the heart of the village begins to fill. It is a patch of open land, trampled short by countless feet, edged by cottages and the low stone wall of the churchyard. On most days, it lies quiet, a place for geese to wander or children to play their smaller games. But on feast days, it becomes the village's stage, its arena, its gathering place. From every path they come, men in their work tunics, women in brighter shawls saved for such days, children darting ahead to claim the best spots. Old folk arrive more slowly, leaning on sticks, their eyes alive with memories of games played long before. The smell of roasting meat drifts from one side of the green, where a spit turns over a bed of glowing embers. Somewhere, a fiddler tunes his instrument, the thin sound cutting through the chatter. At first, the games are small and scattered. Two boys chase each other in a looping run, weaving through the crowd. A group of girls roll hoops along the ground with sticks, their laughter rising each time a hoop wobbles and falls. A pair of young men test their strength in an arm wrestle on the grass, the watching faces leaning in as though their own arms were straining. Then, with a call and a wave, someone begins the first of the larger contests. Wrestling is often the choice. Two men stepping into a ring marked in the grass, their tunics belted tight, their hands reaching to grip and throw. It is a sport as old as the village itself, requiring nothing but the body and the will to push it against another. The crowd calls out, cheers and groans as the match sways back and forth, until one man is thrown and lands on his back with a muffled thud. Not all games are so direct. Some are races, marked from the edge of the green to the farthest oak and back again. The runners line up, barefoot on the packed earth, their bodies tense, their eyes fixed on the path ahead. At the shout, they spring forward, feet pounding, arms pumping, the crowd's voices chasing them all the way. The fastest return flushed and grinning, the slowest smiling still, for here the running itself is half the prize. Around the edges, smaller contests continue. Children play blind man's buff, one blindfolded figure spinning in the center, arms outstretched, while the others circle and dart away. Stones are thrown at a distant mark, each hit met with a satisfied cheer. A few men practice with their bows at the butts near the churchyard, their arrows thudding into the straw targets, for even on feast days, the law demands their skill be kept sharp. The sun climbs higher, and the green is alive with movement. Everywhere, bodies bend, leap, twist, strain. Hands grasp and release. Feet dig into the earth. This is not the labor of the fields or the forest. It is effort given freely, without the shadow of necessity. And yet, the same muscles are at work. The same breath rises in the chest. The same sweat cools on the skin. I have seen games played on palace lawns, their rules strict, their players dressed in silk. I have seen them on dusty commons in far-off lands, with nothing but bare feet and open ground. Here, on this village green, the games belong to all. There is no entry fee, no measure kept but the eyes of the crowd and the memory of who bested whom last year. As the day wears on, the laughter grows louder, the contests longer. The green becomes more than a place of play. It becomes the heart of the village, beating strong under the summer sky. And in that heartbeat, you can hear the joy that survives even in a life so often marked by toil. The joy of movement, of testing the body for the sheer sake of it, and of standing together in a circle of cheers. By midday, the sun stands high and the games grow bolder. The smaller amusements give way to those that draw the crowd into a single roaring ring, contests where strength, skill, and endurance are tested in front of every watching eye. It begins with stone throwing. The stones are not chosen for neatness or uniformity. They are whatever the field or streambed yields, heavy enough to make the arms ache from the first lift. The throwers step forward one by one, the stone resting in their palm or balanced against the shoulder. Some swing it back in an arc before releasing. Others heave it straight from the chest, the muscles in their arms and neck standing out in cords. The crowd marks the distance with shouts, each throw measured against the last, each man hoping to see his stone roll just a little farther than his neighbors. From stone throwing, the mood shifts to contests of pulling. A thick rope is brought out, rough and scratchy, its ends frayed from years of use. Two teams form, lining up on either side, the strongest placed toward the back to anchor the pull. The ground between them is churned to dust from past matches. At the signal, the rope goes taut in an instant, the feet of the front rank digging hard into the earth. Muscles strain, faces redden, breath comes in sharp bursts. The rope trembles under the struggle, each team surging forward a pace only to be dragged back again. When at last one side's footing breaks and they stumble forward in defeat, the winners drop the rope with cheers, their hands red and raw from the friction. But it is the football, if it can be called by that name, that draws the loudest laughter and the wildest cries. There is no marked field, no set number of players. The ball is a stitched leather bladder, scuffed and softened from years of play. The goals are simply 2 points agreed upon at the start, a gate at one end of the village and a broad tree at the other. Between these markers, the entire green becomes a field, and the rules, if there are any, are shouted and forgotten almost as soon as the game begins. When the ball is thrown into the crowd, it disappears into a tangle of bodies. Men push, shove, and scramble. The ball changes hands in moments, carried in a rush toward one end only to be turned back in a sudden surge. Players slip in the churned grass, collide with each other, and rise laughing or groaning as the game sweeps past. The younger and swifter dart at the edges, trying to seize the ball when it breaks free, while the stronger fight in the middle, locked in heaving knots of limbs. There is no gentle pace to it. The game is as much about endurance as skill, the willingness to keep running, keep grappling, even when the breath burns in the chest and the legs feel heavy as stone. Small injuries are common, a scraped knee, a bruised shoulder, but they are met with shrugs and grins. The crowd follows the shifting play, their voices rising in a rolling cheer that moves like a wave from one side of the green to the other. At last, after much struggle and many reversals, the ball is driven through the gate or to the tree, and the match ends not with a whistle, but with the laughter and collapse of its players. The winning side may lift the ball overhead in triumph, but the real prize is the game itself, the sheer, unruly joy of it, the sense of having spent one's strength freely among friends and neighbors. I have seen contests of skill in noble courts, their pace measured and their rules precise, and I have seen these wild village games where the only measure is the shout of the crowd. Both have their own kind of glory, but here, on the open green, the strength of the crowd is not only in its voice. It is in the way it gathers itself into the game, whether as players straining at the rope or as voices carrying the ball onward with their cheers. Beyond the laughter of the wrestling ring and the thunder of the football match lies a quieter contest, quieter, but no less demanding. At the far end of the green, just inside the low wall of the churchyard, stand the village butts. Long mounds of earth faced with straw, built to catch the arrows of the practicing bowmen. They have stood here for years, their shape worn but kept sound. For the law demands that every man practice his shooting on Sundays and feast days, and the reeve makes sure it is done. The archers gather in a loose line, their bows of yew or ash resting easily in their hands. Some are polished and well-kept, others rough from years of use, but all are serviceable, for here skill matters more than beauty. Quivers hang at their hips, the fletching of the arrows bright against the darker wool of their tunics. When the call is given, each archer steps forward in turn. Feet planted wide, knees slightly bent, they draw the bowstring back to the ear. The movement looks simple enough, but the strain is immense. The bows pull heavier than most realize, the muscles of the back and shoulders working as one to hold the line steady. The breath stills, the eyes fix on the center of the straw butt, and with a release as quick as the snap of a twig, the arrow leaps forward. The sound is sharp and satisfying. The hiss of the arrow through the air, the solid thud as it buries itself in the target. Some strike true, quivering near the center. Others land wide or low, greeted with groans or good-natured jeers from the watching crowd. Yet each shot is part of the practice, each miss a lesson to be folded into the next attempt. After one round, the archers retrieve their arrows, pulling them from the straw with a twist and a tug. They exchange quiet words, advice offered, old stories retold, before stepping up again. The rhythm continues. Draw, aim, release, walk, retrieve, return. Over the hours, the hands grow tender where the string snaps against the fingers, and the bow arm grows heavy, but the practice goes on. This is not mere sport. The bow is a weapon as much as a pastime, and the skill to use it is a matter of defense as well as pride. A man who can place his arrow true at the butts will be valued if danger comes to the village. A man who cannot will feel the weight of disapproval. And so the games of the green hold this strand of seriousness, the understanding that strength and skill in the bow are not only for the joy of the contest, but for the safety of all. Even the younger boys watch closely, some holding smaller bows of their own, fashioned by a father or uncle. Their arrows fly shorter, often missing the target entirely, but their faces are alight with the same focus. The path from clumsy first shots to the easy pull of a seasoned archer is a long one, measured in years of steady practice. As the afternoon wanes, the best archers may try for longer shots, stepping back until the butt is a far mark across the green. The arrows arc high, the eye tracking their flight against the sky before they fall with a distant, muffled strike. The crowd watches with a hush, for a long shot well made is a thing of beauty, a blend of power, precision, and patience. I have seen archers in other lands, on other fields, their skill honed not for games but for war. Here, the danger is far away, but the art is the same. The bow does not care whether it is loosed in battle or in sport. It demands the same steady hand, the same calm breath, the same unbroken focus. And so, in the shadow of the church and the hum of the green, the people keep their skill alive, string by string, arrow by arrow, year by year. While the men loose their arrows at the butts and the older boys race along the edge of the green, the youngest of the village gather in their own small ring. Their games need no law to compel them, no great skill to earn a place, only the willing laughter of companions and a space enough to run in. One of the oldest games begins with a simple blindfold. A strip of linen is tied around the eyes of the seeker, who is spun 3 times until the world tilts and turns beneath their feet. Around them, the others creep and dart, calling out in teasing voices, "Here I am!" only to slip away again before a reaching hand can find them. The seeker turns this way and that, arms wide, head tilting to catch the sound of footsteps on the grass. A sudden lunge may catch a sleeve or hem, and then the cry goes up. The caught becomes the seeker, and the game begins anew. Nearby, a group rolls hoops made from bent willow and bound with strips of leather. Each child runs alongside their hoop, guiding it with a stick, keeping it upright as it clatters over the uneven ground. The faster they run, the more the hoop wobbles, and the challenge lies in keeping it steady to the very end of the green. Sometimes two will race side by side, sticks tapping like drumbeats on the rolling rims. Another knot of children plays a game of 9 men's Morris, scratched into the dirt with a stick. Pebbles serve as pieces, each child placing or moving them in turn, trying to trap the other's stones in a line. The shouts here are quieter, the victories more contained, but the same glint of competition shines in the eyes. Even the youngest join in games of simple chase, weaving between the older players, dodging legs and outstretched arms. Their shrieks rise over the deeper hum of the crowd, pure and unmeasured joy spilling into the air. A child will tumble, roll in the grass, then spring up again without pause, their knees green-stained, their cheeks bright with exertion. There is no prize for these games beyond the moment itself. The strength they build is small but real: quickness of foot, steadiness of hand, the beginnings of balance and endurance. More than that, the games teach the turns of play, the give and take, the teasing without malice, the readiness to cheer another's win as if it were one's own. I have seen children at play in the courtyards of cities, in the courtyards of castles, and in the shadow of distant mountains. No matter the setting, the pattern is the same. The circle of friends, the ring of laughter, the sudden dart to catch or escape. It is the first training ground of the body, and often the truest, for here the effort is joined with delight, and the delight ensures the effort is never spared. As the afternoon deepens and the light grows warm, the children's circle shifts and reforms, new games springing up as the old ones fade. A skipping rope appears, its ends turned by 2 steady hands while a third leaps within the arc. The rope slaps the ground in a steady rhythm, and the jumper times their step to its beat. When they tire, another takes their place, and the rope keeps turning. Around them, the great contests continue, but in the children's circle, the games flow without measure or end. There is no final whistle, no clear victor, only the slow drift toward evening, when the parents call their children to the hearth and the green grows quiet again. But in the memory of each child, the circle remains, a space where they learned the shape of laughter, the joy of the chase, and the first taste of strength that will serve them in years to come. As the sun begins its slow descent, the shadows of the cottages stretch long across the green. The games that filled the day fade one by one. The last arrow is loosed at the butts, the final race ends with bent knees and grinning faces, and the football is tucked away, its leather dark with dust and sweat. In their place comes a different kind of gathering, not for contest, but for the sharing of food, drink, and song. From the far end of the green, the smell of roasting meat grows stronger. A great spit turns slowly, its handle cranked by steady hands, the juices hissing where they fall into the coals. Platters of bread and cheese are brought out from the cottages, along with jugs of ale and watered wine. The air hums with voices, not the sharp cries of competition, but the warm murmur of neighbors greeting one another, trading stories, and laughing at the day's small triumphs and mishaps. When the food is ready, it is not served to each in turn, but set out for all. People gather in loose circles, sitting on benches, low stools, or simply on the grass. Children eat quickly, their eyes darting toward the edge of the green where a few still chase each other in the last light. Older folks savor their portions, chewing slowly, their faces lit by the glow of the fire. Then the music begins. A fiddler draws his bow across the strings, the tune rising above the murmur like a bird lifting into the air. A drum joins in, its beat steady as a heartbeat, and a pipe trills a bright counterpoint. The first dancers step forward, not in pairs, but in a line, hands joined, moving in a simple, repeated pattern that all can follow. Boots stamp in time, skirts swirl, the line turns and weaves across the green. The dance is both structured and free. Those who know the steps lead. Those who do not are swept along, their feet finding the rhythm by instinct. The movements are not grand, but they are joyful. A lifting of the heel, a turn of the wrist, a hop to mark the end of a phrase. Laughter rings out when someone stumbles, the mistake folded into the flow of the dance without pause. Around the fire, songs are begun. Some slow and haunting, their words reaching back to generations past, others quick and light, meant to be clapped along to. Voices rise together, the harmonies rough but full, carrying the music into the softening night. Between verses, mugs are refilled, stories are told, and the bonds of the day's play are strengthened in the sharing of the evening. For here, as much as in the contests of the morning, the strength of the village shows itself, not in the lift of a stone or the draw of a bow, but in the weaving together of lives. The day's games may have pitted neighbor against neighbor in good-natured rivalry, but the feast binds them together again, reminding each that their joys are shared, their hardships lightened in company. I have stood on many such greens, in many such evenings, watching the light fade and the first stars appear above the smoke from the cooking fires. No matter the century, no matter the place, the pattern is the same. The work set aside, the body moving not for survival but for celebration, the music carrying all who hear it into a space where time itself seems to slow. As the fire burns lower, the dancers rest, the children grow drowsy, and the elders speak in softer tones. One by one, families rise and make their way home, their steps unhurried in the cool night air. The green lies quiet again, the echoes of laughter and music lingering like the scent of the feast. And though tomorrow will bring the return of labor, the memory of this day, its games, its songs, its shared warmth, will carry in the hearts of the people, ready to be kindled again when the next feast day comes. It often begins not in the tilt yard, but in the great hall. A boy of 7 or 8, dressed in a tunic finer than most, stands at his father's side during the evening meal. The rushes on the floor are fresh, the air scented with herbs and the smoke of the hearth. At the high table sit men in mail, their cloaks edged with fur, their belts heavy with the hilts of swords. The boy watches them closely, how they sit, how they speak, how they carry themselves. This is his first lesson, though no one names it as such. A future knight must learn not only to fight, but to hold himself with a bearing that marks him as both warrior and servant of his lord. His eyes follow every movement of the older men, the way they drink without spilling, how they greet each person with a nod of measured respect, the stillness they maintain even in laughter. By the time he is sent to serve as a page in another lord's household, often around the age of 7, he is ready to begin in earnest. His duties are humble at first, carrying messages, serving at table, cleaning and maintaining the arms and armor of his betters. Yet each of these tasks has its place in his training. Polishing a sword teaches him its weight, the curve of its guard, the way its edge must be kept keen. Carrying a shield across the hall shows him the balance required, the pull on the arm and shoulder. The older squires, themselves in training, sometimes allow him to watch their drills. In the courtyard, they practice with wooden swords, their blows ringing in the cold air. They ride under the eye of the master of horses, learning to control their mounts with knee and rein alike. They run, wrestle, and lift heavy stones, building the strength they will one day need for the armor they must wear. The boy takes these sights into himself, eager for the day when he will be given his own wooden sword, his own place in the line of trainees. Until then, he is quick to serve, quick to listen, and slow to forget. The castle itself is his school, its walls teaching him discipline, its people teaching him loyalty, its routines teaching him the patience without which no knight can be made. I have seen this pattern in many halls, the young boy starting with broom and bucket, the slow climb toward weapon and shield. It is a long road, and many never see its end, but here, in the first years, the shaping begins. The boy may not yet wear a sword at his side, but in his mind he carries one, and each day brings him closer to the moment when it will be his in truth. If the sword is the knight's soul, the horse is his other half. Without it, he is but a man with arms. With it, he becomes a moving tower, swift and commanding. This truth is impressed upon the young trainee from the first time he is led into the stable. The stable is a place of warmth and noise, the shuffle of hooves on straw, the snort of breath in the cool air, the creak of leather tack. The smell of hay and horseflesh is thick here, settling into the clothes and hair of those who work within. The boy begins his lessons not in the saddle, but on the ground, feeding, grooming, and tending to the mounts. He learns to curry the coat until it shines, to clean the hooves of mud and stones, to speak softly and move with calm so as not to startle. Only when he has proven himself patient and sure-footed is he allowed to ride. At first, it is a small, steady horse, chosen for gentleness rather than speed. The boy learns to sit upright, heels down, hands light on the reins. He practices walking in a circle, halting, and turning without jerking the bit. Each command is given more with the legs and seat than the hands, the beginnings of the silent communication between rider and mount. As he grows stronger, he moves to larger horses, the destriers and coursers bred for war. These are powerful creatures, their muscles shifting like water beneath the skin, their temperaments more spirited. The young rider must learn to match their energy without letting it overwhelm him. Gallops test his balance, jumps test his timing, and all the while he is taught to keep his seat as though he were part of the animal itself. Then comes the training with arms on horseback. He rides with a wooden sword, striking at posts or straw dummies while guiding his horse in tight turns. He learns to lean low over the saddle to avoid a blow, to draw and notch an arrow without losing speed, to steady the point of a lance so that it strikes true at a target. The horse, too, is trained for war, to stand firm under the clash of weapons, to wheel and charge at the touch of a heel. These lessons are not without risk. A misstep in a gallop can throw a rider hard to the ground. A startled horse can crush with a single misplaced hoof. The boy learns caution alongside courage, and respect alongside mastery. Every bruise and scraped hand is a teacher, reminding him that skill is built on both practice and humility. I have watched many such pairings of horse and rider across the ages. The finest are those in which the bond is so complete that the horse moves as though it can feel the rider's thoughts. This is the partnership toward which every trainee strives, for in the day of battle, that bond may mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat. Once a young trainee has mastered the horse, his attention turns fully to the tools of his calling, the sword, the lance, and the weapons of war that mark him as more than a mere rider. The first sword he holds is not of steel, but of wood. Its weight is chosen to mimic the real thing, heavy enough to teach his muscles, yet harmless in clumsy hands. Under the watchful eye of a seasoned master-at-arms, he learns the stances. Feet firm, knees bent, sword held not too high nor too low. His first cuts are slow and deliberate, downward, upward, side to side, repeated until the movement becomes a memory in the body. From there, the lessons grow more complex. The young trainee is taught to parry, to turn a blow aside with the flat of the blade, to step into an attack rather than shy away from it. Wooden shields are brought into play, and the air rings with the thud of practice strikes. These drills are repeated day after day, often until the arms ache and the palms blister. There is no gentleness in the training. A mistake is met with a firm strike from the master's own sword, a reminder to keep guard high and eyes sharp. In time, the wooden sword is replaced with a blunt steel blade. It is heavier, truer in balance, and the boy feels the difference in every movement. He learns that a sword is not swung wildly, but guided with precision, that a thrust, well placed, can end a fight more quickly than any great sweeping cut. The lance brings new challenges. It is longer than the sword, unwieldy in the hand at first, and demands strength not only in the arm but through the whole body. Practice begins on horseback, riding at a target, a ring suspended from a frame, or a straw man set in the field. The goal is not merely to strike it, but to strike true with the point level and steady despite the pounding gallop beneath. When the young trainee's aim improves, he is set to charge at a tilting post, a stout beam with a shield on one end and a weighted arm on the other. If he fails to strike squarely, the arm swings around and strikes him from behind, a stinging lesson in accuracy and control. The pairing of sword and lance is at the heart of a knight's skill. One is for the close press of combat, the other for the shock and reach of the charge. The best must master both, switching between them as the moment demands. Training for this is relentless. One day spent in the yard, sparring until sweat darkens the tunic. The next in the field, the lance couched underarm, the horse urged forward until man and beast move as one. Through all this, the young knight in training learns that weapons are an extension of the self. They do not move without his will, but neither do they obey if treated carelessly. Respect for the sword, the lance, and the horse is woven into every lesson, for each is a partner in the life he is shaping, a life that may one day demand all three to be called upon at once. I have seen the finest warriors fail because they forgot this balance, and I have seen young squires, fresh to the lists, ride with such steadiness and strike with such certainty that the watching crowd knew they were seeing the making of a true knight. In those moments, the long years of training, the blisters, the bruises, the endless drills, are revealed not as toil, but as the quiet forge in which mastery is shaped. The tilt yard is not the battlefield, yet it hums with the same anticipation. It is a place of display, of proving, where skill is tested before the eyes of lords and ladies, rivals and allies alike. The young squire, now strong in seat and steady in hand, comes here not only to learn but to be seen. The yard itself is a long, narrow field, often enclosed by wooden rails. At one end, pavilions stand in bright colors, the banners of each knight rippling in the wind. Armor gleams in the sunlight. Lances are stacked in neat rows. Horses, draped in caparisons matching their riders' colors, stamp and snort as they wait. The air smells of trampled grass, oiled leather, and the faint tang of metal. Before the main event begins, the young trainee watches the knights prepare. Squires help their masters into armor, piece by piece. The padded gambeson first, then the mail, then the plates that cover breast, arms, and legs. Straps are tightened, buckles fastened, visors tested. This process alone is a lesson, knowing the order, the fit, the care each piece demands. When the justs commence, the squire studies every pass. Two riders face each other at opposite ends of the list, lances leveled, shields ready. At the signal, they charge, the thud of hooves shaking the ground, the lances lowering until their tips aim for the narrow target of the opponent's shield or chest. A clean strike shatters the lance in a burst of splinters, the crowd erupting in cheers. A glancing blow is met with polite applause, while a miss draws murmurs. Between matches, the squire may be called to fetch a fresh lance, to lead a horse to the line, or to help lift a fallen rider to his feet. Each task keeps him close to the action, allowing him to feel the pace of the event. The brief moments of stillness before the charge, the rush of impact, the aftermath of dust and noise. The tilt yard is more than a place for skill. It is a stage. The colors worn, the bearing of the rider, the salute given to the lady in the stands. All are part of the display. A knight who rides well but shows no courtesy gains respect for his arm, but not for his name. The young trainee learns that the eyes upon him matter almost as much as the strike he delivers. Not all contests here are lance work. Some are melees, groups of knights on horseback, charging and wheeling in a mock battle that can turn fierce in an instant. Others are on foot, swords ringing against shields, the fighters pressing and retreating across the sanded ground. In each, the squire sees the blending of skill and endurance, and the unspoken understanding that even in sport, the weapons can wound. It is this nearness to danger that marks the tilt yard as more than mere pageantry. I have seen lances break in ways that drive splinters through mail, horses stumble and crush their riders, swords land harder than intended. A careless moment can bring weeks of recovery, or worse. The lesson is clear. Even in the arena, the knight's craft demands respect, and the price of neglect can be high. For the squire, the tilt yard is both inspiration and warning. It shows him the height of skill to which he must aspire, and the risks that lie along the way. Each splintered lance, each ringing blow, each cheer from the stands weaves itself into his vision of knighthood. A vision bright with honor, but edged with the shadow of its cost. The path to knighthood is paved not only with skill and honor, but with bruises, broken bones, and the ever-present knowledge that a single mistake may end the journey before it is complete. Even in the controlled space of training, the dangers are real, and they leave their marks on both body and spirit. In the practice yard, a squire may take a sword blow to the hand that numbs his fingers for days, or a strike to the ribs that leaves him gasping for breath. A misjudged parry can split the skin over the knuckles. A misstep in the sand can twist an ankle. The master-at-arms does not soften the lessons. The young must learn to endure pain, for in battle there is no pause to nurse a wound. Horse training carries its own perils. A green destrier may rear without warning, unseating its rider and sending him crashing onto the packed earth. A startled mount may bolt, dragging its handler through the yard before the reins are dropped. Hooves strike with the force of iron. More than one squire has walked with a limp for the rest of his days after a careless moment in the stable. The lance, too, is no gentle teacher. Even blunted for training, it can drive a man from the saddle when the force of the charge is behind it. The impact can jar the arm until it feels half pulled from the shoulder, or send a shock through the chest that leaves the breath caught and the vision swimming. I have seen young men rise laughing from such falls, and I have seen others carried away to the healer's bench. They're just done for the season. Some wounds are slower in their making. The weight of armor, worn day after day in drills, strains the neck and back. The constant repetition of sword and lance work wears the joints, stiffening them long before age would have done the same. Fingers grow thick with callus, shoulders ache in the quiet of night, and the squire learns to live with a low, constant throb in the muscles. Yet perhaps the greatest danger is not to the body, but to the will. A fall that comes too hard, a blow that lands too cleanly, can shake a young man's confidence. I have watched promising trainees grow hesitant, their movements slowed by the memory of pain. Overcoming this is part of the craft. Learning to ride again after a tumble, to lift the sword again after the bruise fades, to trust one's training despite the knowledge of its risks. The healers in the castle know these patterns well. They keep salves for swelling, poultices for bruising, splints for bones that will not hold their shape without help. In the corner of the infirmary lies a collection of cracked shields, split practice swords, and dented helms, each one a silent record of a mistake made and a lesson learned. And yet, for all these dangers, the training goes on. The path demands it. The young squire learns to see each injury as a mark of progress, each scar as a proof of endurance. He understands, in time, that the craft he pursues is not only about striking the foe, but about withstanding all that comes with the pursuit. The aches, the setbacks, the moments when the body fails and must be willed forward by the mind alone. I have stood in many practice yards, in many ages, and the truth has never changed. To be a knight is to carry both the blade and the burden. The dangers are as much a part of the making as the skill itself. And when the squire finally earns his spurs, it is not only his prowess that is tested and proven, but his resilience, the quiet, stubborn strength that has carried him through every fall, every bruise, every moment when the craft demanded more than he thought he could give. The village green, so full of laughter on feast days, also holds its share of quiet aftermaths. When the music fades and the crowds drift home, some leave with more than the memory of a game well played. The grass hides bruises beneath tunics, scratches along forearms, the dull ache of joints turned awkwardly in the heat of the contest. Most injuries are small things, the kind a man will carry without complaint. A shoulder jarred in a wrestling throw, a finger bent back in the scramble for the football, a scrape across the shin where another's boot met the bone. Such hurts are met with grins and the easy phrase, "It will be well by morning." But not all fades so quickly. A fall in the wrong way can twist a knee, swelling it until it cannot bear weight. A hard blow from a stone-throwing contest can split the skin along the brow, sending a trickle of blood into the eye. Once, I saw a lad take a strike to the head in a football match. He laughed it off at first, but by nightfall his speech was slurred and his steps unsteady, and he did not rise again in the morning. There is no surgeon's tent on the green, no ready chest of clean bandages. In most cases, a friend or kin will lead the injured home, where remedies are simple. A cloth soaked in cold water, a smear of honey over a cut, the leg bound in linen until the swelling eases. For deeper wounds, or those that fester, the village healer may be called. But even she will admit that some injuries have a will of their own. The games themselves invite risk by their very nature. In wrestling, a man may seek to throw his opponent with greater force than is wise, eager for the cheer of the crowd. In football, the chase for the ball draws all attention forward, leaving no thought for who may be in the path. The archery butts are safer, yet an arrow loosed too soon or aimed too high can find flesh as easily as straw. And yet, the people do not turn from the games. The risk is part of the life they know. The same acceptance that sees them walk through muddy streets where a slip may break a bone, or climb ladders to thatch a roof with no thought of the drop below. Play, like work, is done in full measure, with the understanding that the body may pay for its pleasures. I have watched such scenes for centuries. The laughter of the green is sweeter for the danger beneath it, and the memories carried from the field are often told with more pride if a scar accompanies them. Still, I cannot help but see the fragility that lies beneath the bravado, the fine thread that can fray in an instant, turning the joy of play into the long silence of recovery. In the tilt yard, the air is filled with pageantry, color, and the gleam of armor. Yet beneath this display lies a truth known to every man who takes the field. The ground is unforgiving, and the fall is always closer than it seems. When two riders meet in the charge, their lances leveled, the impact is a marriage of skill and danger. Even with blunted tips, the force of the blow can drive a man from the saddle, sending him crashing to the earth. I have seen riders land on their feet by fortune, rolling to stand with a bow to the crowd. I have also seen them fall heavy on the back of the head, the visor rattling, the breath leaving them in a rush, the body still for too long before a groan proves life remains. The weight of armor, meant to protect, can turn against its wearer in a fall. A man pinned beneath his own destrier must contend not only with the pain of the landing, but with the crushing press of steel against bone. In melee contests, where several riders charge and will together, the risk grows greater. A toppled horse may cause a chain of falls, each rider struggling to keep clear of hooves and flailing weapons. Even on foot, the lists are not gentle. In the sword bouts that follow the justs, the fighters close to striking distance, the edges of their shields locked, their blades swinging in heavy arcs. A misstep on the churned sand can send a man to his knees, leaving him exposed to a blow he cannot turn aside. Though the weapons are dulled, the force behind them is not. Bones can break beneath mail, and a helmet struck too often can leave its wearer reeling. The aftermath of such falls is rarely quick to mend. A broken arm may be set and bound, but weeks of recovery follow, during which the muscles lose their strength. A cracked rib makes every breath a trial, and the knight must choose between resting it and enduring the pain to continue his duties. The head injuries are the most feared. A fall that leaves the mind clouded, the memory dulled, the speech slow and halting. In the days after a tournament, the tilt yard grows quiet, but the healer's chambers fill. Stripped of armor, the proud forms of the knights reveal the truth beneath. Deep bruises blooming purple and green, bandages wound tight around limbs, eyes shadowed from lack of rest. The songs of victory sung in the hall rarely speak of these moments, yet they are as much a part of the field as the cheer of the crowd. And still, the justs go on. The men return to the lists as soon as they are able, their bodies carrying the memory of past falls but their minds fixed on the next contest. For to stand aside too long is to fade from the memory of the lords and ladies who watch, and a knight's place in the hall is only as secure as his last display of skill. I have stood at the rails of many tilt yards, my eyes following each charge, and I have learned this. No matter the century, no matter the armor, the fall is always waiting, silent and patient, just beyond the moment of triumph. When the injuries of field or green run deeper than a cloth and a home remedy can mend, the road often leads to the monastery. The high walls promise not only prayer, but care, for within them are men, and sometimes women, whose calling is to tend the sick and injured as part of their service to God. The infirmary is not a grand place. It is a long, low hall, cool even in summer, its windows narrow and high to keep the air still. The walls are whitewashed, though years have dimmed the color, and the floor is worn smooth by the passage of many feet. Beds line the walls, not the soft feathered pallets of noble chambers, but frames of wood strung with rope, their thin mattresses stuffed with straw. Each is covered with a blanket of coarse wool, washed often but always faintly scented with smoke from the hearth where the washing is dried. The air is heavy with the smells of boiled herbs, beeswax, and vinegar. A pot of sage or rosemary simmers in the corner, sending its steam into the room, for it is believed that such scents can drive away harmful airs. On a narrow table near the door, jars of dried leaves, roots, and flowers stand in rows, their labels carefully inked. There are small knives for cutting poultices, mortars and pestles for grinding, and basins for washing wounds. Here the injured are brought, whether they are peasants with a broken limb from the green or squires thrown from their horses in the tilt-yard. The monk-physician greets each with a quiet nod, speaking little as he examines the wound. His touch is firm but gentle, the years having taught him that certainty steadies the fearful. He may cleanse a cut with wine, stitch it with fine thread, and bind it with strips of clean linen. A broken bone is set and splinted, the patient told to rest, though in truth, rest is not easily found in the hard beds and close air. Pain is eased with infusions of willow bark or poppy, though the latter is given sparingly, for too much dulls not only pain but breath. Fever is met with cooling cloths and prayers, for remedies are few when the body turns inward against itself. The monks believe, as many do, that illness and injury are as much trials of the soul as of the flesh, and so the sound of chanting often drifts through the infirmary, low and steady as the heartbeat. Some who come here leave in a few days, their wounds clean and their limbs mending. Others stay for weeks, the slow work of healing measured in the changing of bandages and the return of appetite. A few never leave at all, their injuries too great, their bodies too frail to recover. For these, the infirmary becomes a place of passage, where the body is eased as best it can be and the spirit prepared for what lies beyond. The monastery's care is given freely, though gifts of food or coin are welcome from those who can afford them. Even in these quiet halls, the rhythm of the outside world is felt. Harvests that bring more accidents, tournaments that swell the number of the injured, harsh winters when the cold itself wounds the body. I have walked such halls in many lands, the quiet hum of labor the same in each, the soft footfalls of the healer moving from bed to bed, the scrape of pestle on stone, the murmured prayers that rise and fall like a tide. The infirmary is not a place of miracles, but of steady, patient work, where the body is given every chance it can have, and where the living are reminded, in the faces of the wounded and the dead, of how narrow the thread of life truly is. In the Middle Ages, the tending of wounds and the mending of broken bodies was rarely a matter of skill alone. Healing walked hand in hand with faith, for it was believed that no salve could work without the favor of God, and no bone could knit without his will. When a man fell hard in the tilt-yard or was struck down on the green, the first act was often not to bind the wound, but to cross oneself and whisper a prayer. Some called upon Christ directly. Others invoked the saints known for their intercession in times of illness. Saint Roch for plague and pestilence, Saint Apollonia for toothaches, Saint Sebastian for protection against arrows and sudden death. The healers, too, worked with this blend of the earthly and the divine. A poultice of camphor leaves might be laid over a bruised limb, but only after the sign of the cross was traced upon it. A fever might be met with willow bark and cool cloths, yet the patient's bed would also be sprinkled with holy water, or a relic placed beneath the pillow to guard against evil spirits. Many believed that misfortune on the field was more than mere chance, that a poorly aimed blow or a sudden fall might be a sign of divine displeasure, a warning to amend one's ways. In such cases, confession was sought as urgently as the healer's aid, the wounded man unburdening his soul in hope that the body might follow the spirit into recovery. Charms and tokens found their place alongside prayer. A scrap of parchment with a psalm written upon it might be worn in a small pouch around the neck. A ribbon blessed on a saint's feast day could be tied around the arm or wrist. These were not seen as superstition, but as part of the great web of divine protection that might hold a man safe from the worst of his injuries. Yet for all these beliefs, fortune remained fickle. Two men might suffer the same fall, one rising with nothing but a bruise, the other struck down by unseen harm within. In such moments, the survivors spoke of God's mercy, and the lost were said to have been called home in his time. The tournaments themselves often began with a blessing. The lists would be sprinkled with holy water, the combatants bowing their heads as a priest prayed for their safety. On the village green, where the contests were humbler, such ceremony was less common. But the same hope lingered, that joy would be found without harm, and that all would walk home at the day's end. I have stood in both these places, in the roar of the tilt-yard and the laughter of the green, and I have seen how faith steadied the hearts of those who played at danger. For whether they believed their fortunes were written by the hand of God or turned by the wheel of chance, they stepped into the field with the same quiet trust. that the thread of their life would hold a little longer, and that the hand of the divine might guide it through the hazards of the day. To those who lived in the Middle Ages, the presence of danger in games and sport was neither a surprise nor a deterrent. Life itself was a field of hazards, and the joy of movement, contest, and fellowship was rarely weighed against the chance of harm in the same way we might consider it now. The villager knew that his body was already bound to the labors of the land. The strain of lifting stones from the fields, the sharp bite of tools that slipped in the hand, the aches that came from bending over the same task for hours in the sun or cold. A bruise from a wrestling match, a sore arm from casting stones, even a cracked rib from an unlucky fall. These were not alien to his daily experience. They were a continuation of the risks his body faced in work, made more bearable by the laughter and companionship that surrounded them. For the knight or squire, the measure was similar. Training for war was itself more dangerous than any feast day game. A tilt in the joust or a blow in the sword yard was not just tolerated, it was expected. Each scar was a mark of experience, proof of endurance. To shrink from such hazards would have been to step away from one's calling. A choice few in such roles could make without losing honor. This acceptance of risk was bound to a deeper understanding that life's thread was fragile, and no amount of caution could make it unbreakable. Illness could strike without warning. Famine could sweep the land. Accidents could occur in the quietest of days. In such a world, the joy found in games and contests was not lessened by danger. It was sharpened by it. The dance, the race, the charge with lance or bow. These were not only acts of skill, but of defiance, a declaration that the body would move and strive even under the shadow of mortality. Communities also knew that shared risk strengthened their bonds. When a man limped from the green after a hard fall, his neighbors offered him a seat, a drink, perhaps a story to distract him from the ache. When a knight was unhorsed in the lists, his fellow squires helped him to the healer, their arms steadying him as they spoke encouragement. These moments built the trust and fellowship that could not be forged by safety alone. Of course, not all saw the same worth in risk. There were elders who shook their heads at the roughness of the games, mothers who fretted over the bruises their sons brought home, lords who frowned upon the injuries that took a strong man from his work for weeks. Yet even they knew that such caution could not wholly still the contests. For to forbid the games would be to strip away a vital thread from the fabric of village and noble life alike. I have stood at the edge of many fields, watching the choices made. I have seen the young throw themselves into play without thought, the old weigh the dangers more carefully, and the wounded return again once their bodies had healed, drawn back not only by pride but by the yearning to be part of the life that pulsed through the games. In the end, the measure of risk was taken not with numbers or laws, but with the quiet reckoning each man or woman made within themselves, whether the joy of the moment was worth the price it might claim. And more often than not, in those days, the answer was yes. In the Middle Ages, the mending of bodies did not rest in the hands of one kind of healer alone. Instead, 3 paths wound through the art of care, each distinct yet often crossing in quiet cooperation. The wise woman of the village, the monastic healer within the cloister, and the barber surgeon who walked between worlds of craft and cure. The wise woman's knowledge came not from books, but from years of watching, listening, and trying. She knew the herbs that grew in hedgerows and meadows, the way comfort's broad leaves could ease swelling, or how the golden heads of chamomile might calm a restless stomach. Her cures were gathered in baskets and brewed over kitchen fires, the scent of rosemary and thyme mingling with the smoke. In her doorway, the sick sat on rough stools, sipping infusions from wooden cups while she listened to their ailments. To some, she was a treasure. To others, a figure half feared, for her skill seemed to skirt the edge of the unseen. Within the monastery walls, the healer's path was shaped by discipline and faith. Here, knowledge was preserved in ink and parchment, copied by careful hands in the scriptorium. The cloister garden was a place of quiet order. Neat rows of sage, rue, fennel, and mint, each marked by small wooden signs. The monastic healer combined prayer with practice, tending the sick in the infirmary with remedies drawn from both ancient texts and lived experience. A fever might be met with a draft from a recipe written centuries before. A wound cleaned and bound with the precision of one who has done so 100 times before matins. The barber surgeon was the most practical of the three, his work rooted in the body structure and the tools to shape or repair it. His shop might be found in a busy market street, the striped pole outside marking his trade. He cut hair and trimmed beards, but also drew teeth, lanced boils, and set broken bones. For injuries that needed more than a poultice, a deep cut from a blade, a limb mangled in a fall, it was the barber surgeon who stepped forward, his knives and saws wrapped in cloth, his hands steady from long habit. These three paths did not exist in isolation. A man injured in a tournament might first see the barber surgeon to have a wound stitched, then be tended with herbal salves from a wise woman's garden, and finally seek the prayers of the monastic healer for his recovery. In times of plague or great sickness, all might work side by side, their differences set aside before the greater task of saving lives. Each path had its limits. The wise woman's remedies could not always match the force of a sudden infection. The monastic healer's prayers did not always bring the body back from the edge. The barber surgeon's skill could not replace what had been lost. And yet, for all these limits, they kept alive the fragile hope that sickness and injury could be turned aside, that the thread could be held for another day. I have watched them all at work, the stoop of the wise woman as she gathers herbs in the rain, the still patience of the monk at a bedside, the quick, sure motions of the barber surgeon at his bench. Different in manner, bound by the same calling, to meet the body's frailty with the hands, the mind, and the heart alike. Within the high, sheltering walls of the cloister lies a place both orderly and alive, the physic garden. It is here that the monastic healers grow the living heart of their craft, each plant chosen for its virtue, each bed laid with care so that none may overshadow another. In the early morning, before the day's labor begins in earnest, the garden is quiet save for the rustle of leaves and the distant call of crows. Paths of crushed gravel lead between neat squares of earth, their edges lined with small stones to keep the soil from spilling. The air is scented with the mingling of many plants, sharp rosemary, cool mint, the faint sweetness of chamomile. Here grows comfrey, its broad, hairy leaves and purple bells known to knit bones and ease swelling. Nearby stands the rue, its bitter scent said to ward off pestilence and evil spirits. Rows of sage grow thick and silver green, their leaves prized for soothing throats and strengthening the body. Along the warmest wall, rosemary bushes stand tall, their evergreen sprigs as useful for remembrance in the chapel as they are for cleansing wounds. Fennel's feathery fronds sway in the breeze, its seeds kept for easing digestion. Clumps of yarrow stand ready to staunch bleeding, their white flowers bright against the green. Even the humble plantain, found in every patch of ground, is valued here for drawing out infection when bruised and laid upon the skin. The garden is not only for healing the sick, it is also a place of learning. Novices move between the beds with baskets, gathering herbs under the direction of the infirmer. Some plants are harvested fresh and used at once. Others are hung in bundles to dry in the shaded walkways, their scents growing richer as the weeks pass. Roots are dug in the autumn, when their strength is greatest, then sliced thin and laid upon racks in the airy loft above the herb store. In a corner of the garden, a small stone basin catches rainwater. Here, the healers wash their hands before tending the plants, believing that cleanliness of body honors the purity of their purpose. A wooden bench stands nearby, where the infirmer may sit with a book, perhaps a copy of the herbarium of Dioscorides or another ancient text, its pages marked with careful notes in the margins. Each plant is known not only for its uses, but for its humoral nature, whether it brings warmth or coolness, dryness or moisture to the body. The healers believe that sickness often comes from imbalance, and so they match the remedy to the need, blending plants as a cook might blend flavors, until the mixture suits the patient's condition. Beyond its usefulness, the garden is a place of quiet solace. The steady work of tending the beds, the rhythm of planting and harvest, offers a peace that heals the mind as surely as the body. The monks see in it a reflection of their own order, each plant with its place, each task with its time, all working together toward the health of the whole. I have walked these cloisters in many lands, the same sense rising from the earth, the same careful hands at work. In the turning of the seasons, the garden renews itself, and with it, the healers renew their hope, that in the face of the body's frailty, there will always be something living to set against it. Within the quiet of the infirmary and the back rooms of a barber surgeon's shop, there is a certain order to the tools of healing. They are not laid out for display, but arranged for reach and readiness, each with a purpose that has been proven through years of use. On the healer's table stand mortars and pestles of stone and wood, their surfaces stained by countless grindings of leaves, roots, and seeds. The steady, circular motion of pestle against mortar is as familiar to the hand as a prayer to the tongue, the rhythm binding the healer's craft to the long chain of those who came before. Jars of powdered herbs stand beside them, stoppered with cork or wax, each marked in ink. Salvia for sage, rosmarinus for rosemary, symphoton for comfrey. Nearby lie knives, some slender and sharp for cutting bandages, others broader for trimming flesh away from a wound. A few are curved for more delicate work, lancing a boil, opening an abscess to release its poison. There are needles of bronze or iron, fine yet strong, threaded with linen or silk for stitching the skin. Bone needles, smoother to the touch, are kept for sewing cloth rather than flesh. Bowls and basins of brass or pottery are used for washing wounds, often with wine or vinegar to cleanse them. Wooden splints of varying lengths lean against the wall, ready to be bound to a broken limb with strips of linen. Some are plain, others padded with wool to ease the pressure on tender flesh. The barber surgeon's kit carries sterner tools. Here are saws for removing limbs too damaged to heal, their teeth fine and sharp, forceps for gripping and pulling teeth or foreign matter from a wound, hooks for lifting flesh during cutting, cautery irons to sear bleeding vessels closed. These are stored with care, their edges kept keen, their handles smooth from many hands. Bandages are rolled from old linen, boiled and dried in the sun before use. Some are plain, others are smeared with honey or resin to aid healing and keep away corruption. Poultice cloths, softer and looser in weave, are used to hold crushed herbs against the skin. In the monastic infirmary, alongside these tools, one finds writing materials, parchment, ink, and quills for keeping records of treatments given and their results. A careful healer notes not only the remedy used, but the season, the weather, the patient's humors, and whether the cure succeeded or failed. These records become the quiet treasury of the infirmary, a store of experience to guide future hands. Though the tools may seem simple, they demand skill in use. A knife in unsteady hands can harm as easily as heal. A splint wrongly set can twist a bone forever out of place. The barber surgeon's saw, used too late, may spread corruption instead of stopping it. Used too soon, it may take what could have been saved. I have watched healers turn these humble instruments into lifelines, grinding the right herb to soothe a fever, binding a limb so it may knit again, drawing a splinter of wood from deep within the flesh without leaving poison behind. There is no magic in the tools themselves. Their power lies in the knowledge and patience of the one who wields them. In their keeping, I see a reflection of the body they serve, each part with its purpose, each dependent on the skill that joins them together. Just as the body's health depends on the balance of its humors, the healer's success rests on the harmony of hand, mind, and heart in the work. The art of healing in the Middle Ages was not a single discipline, but a weaving together of remedies, rituals, and reasoning that flowed from many sources, ancient texts, local lore, and the steady observations of generations. The methods themselves ranged from the gentle to the severe, each chosen according to the healer's understanding of the body and the balance it required. One of the most common treatments was the poultice, herbs crushed into a moist paste and laid against the skin. Camphor leaves bound over a bruised limb might ease swelling and knit the bone beneath. A blend of garlic and onion was thought to draw out infection. Plantain leaves, bruised and warm, could soothe the sting of bites and burns. The poultice cloth was changed often, the healer noting whether the flesh beneath grew pink with health or pale with decline. Infusions and decoctions, herbs steeped in hot water or boiled to release their strength, were given for ailments within. Chamomile for easing the stomach, fennel for clearing the chest, sage for sharpening the mind and memory. Wine was sometimes used instead of water, both for its warming nature and its keeping quality, the bitterness of the herbs mellowed by the drink. Bleeding, though feared by some, was among the most widely practiced methods. Guided by the theory of humors, the healer might open a vein with a small knife or apply leeches to draw away the excess thought to cause sickness. A red, flushed face might call for bloodletting to reduce heat. A sluggish, pale complexion might lead to cupping or purging instead, to restore balance by other means. For wounds, cleanliness, as it was understood, was vital. Cuts were washed with wine or vinegar to prevent corruption, then stitched with fine thread. Honey, with its natural preservative quality, was often laid beneath the bandage, sealing the wound from the air. In deeper injuries, the flesh might be cauterized with a heated iron, the hiss and sharp scent filling the room as the vessel was sealed against further bleeding. Prayer wove itself into these acts as naturally as breath. A healer might murmur a psalm while stitching a wound, or make the sign of the cross over a poultice before binding it in place. Certain remedies were accompanied by spoken charms, not idle superstition in the eyes of the time, but another layer of care, calling on divine favor to strengthen the work of the hands. Observation was as crucial as any herb or knife. The good healer watched the patient's eyes for brightness or dullness, listened to the voice for strength or faltering, felt the skin for heat or chill. They marked whether the appetite returned, whether the night passed in rest or restlessness, whether the wound drained clean or turned foul. These signs told them more than the words of the sufferer, guiding them toward remedy or retreat. And yet, for all their care, there were limits no method could pass. The deeper infections, the wasting fevers, the invisible injuries to the head or heart, these often slipped beyond the reach of both herb and prayer. In such cases, the healer's role became one of comfort rather than cure, easing pain, steadying the spirit, and helping the patient prepare for whatever lay ahead. I have seen such methods in huts of wattle and daub, in cloisters of stone, in market stalls where the wind carried the scent of herbs through the streets. The tools may have been plain, the understanding imperfect, but the hands that worked them carried a quiet resolve. For in every age, to face the body's fragility with such patience is itself an act of rare strength. However skilled the healer, however rich the store of herbs and careful the tending, there always came a point where the work of human hands could go no further. This was the unspoken boundary of the craft, the line where skill gave way to fate, and where the healer's tools were set aside in favor of prayer alone. Some ailments were known from the first to be beyond remedy. The wasting fevers that consumed the body from within, leaving only hollow cheeks and dull eyes. The sudden seizures that struck without warning. The black swellings of plague that marked the body like a death sentence. In such cases, the healer might still offer comfort. A cool cloth, a draught to ease pain, the murmured assurance that nothing more could be done. But the struggle for life had already passed into other hands. Even wounds that seemed at first mending could betray the healer's hope. A deep cut might close neatly under the stitch, only to grow hot and red in the days after, the flesh swelling with unseen corruption. A broken limb, well set and bound, could fail to knit, leaving the patient lame for life. Head injuries were the most treacherous. A fall from a horse, a strike in the lists, a blow during a village game might leave no mark on the skin. Yet within the skull the slow tide of blood could drown thought and breath alike. In the face of such limits, healers learned a certain humility. They knew the measure of their art, and they understood that their skill was but one thread in the greater tapestry of a life. The wise woman might speak of the will of the saints. The monk might say that God calls whom he will. The barber surgeon, more practical, might simply shrug and speak of chance. Yet all felt the same truth. The healer does not decide the span of days. Still, they did not surrender lightly. I have seen a monk keep vigil 3 nights over a fevered patient, changing cloths and murmuring psalms. A wise woman pacing the edge of a dark wood to find the one plant she believes might turn the illness. A barber surgeon working by candlelight, his hands stained and steady as he fights to keep the breath in a man's body. There is a dignity in such persistence, even when it ends in loss. Those who recovered often spoke of the healer's care as the turning point, whether or not the remedy itself held the power. Those who died were remembered with the comfort that all had been done that could be done. In both cases, the healer's place in the community was strengthened, not for invincibility, but for steadfastness. I have stood beside many of them, unseen, in the stillness after the last breath has been drawn. The tools lie where they were set down, the herbs rest unused in their jars, and the air holds the faint scent of rosemary or myrrh. There is no shame in such endings. The craft was given its chance, and the rest lies beyond mortal reach. Thus, the limits of the healer's art became a reminder to all who lived in those days that life was never fully in their keeping. The body was a fragile vessel, and even the best hands could only hold it together for so long. The rest was entrusted to the unseen, to faith, to fortune, to the mystery that waits for every living soul. In every village and town of the Middle Ages, there was one sound that could still the street and turn every head: the slow, heavy tolling of the church bell for the dead. Its voice carried over fields and through narrow lanes, a solemn measure that told the living one of their own had passed from the earth. The bell was not struck in haste. A single deep note, followed by a pause, then another, each stroke like the measured breath of the great stone building itself. The pattern was sometimes altered to mark whether the departed was man, woman, or child, for even in death the rolls of life were echoed. Those who heard it would often murmur a prayer where they stood, crossing themselves before returning to their work, though their thoughts might linger on the name of the one whose journey had ended. In the villages I have walked, death is not hidden away. It is a presence as familiar as the hearth's warmth or the winter's frost. The body is washed and laid out in the home, the family keeping vigil with candles and quiet prayers. Neighbors come to pay their respects, bringing bread, ale, or small coins to help the household through the days ahead. Children are not shielded from the sight. They stand beside their elders, learning in silence the way of farewell. The funeral procession moves at the pace of the slowest mourner. The coffin, or in poorer places, a simple shroud, is borne on the shoulders of kin or friends. The path to the church is a known one, trodden by many feet over many years, and those along the way step aside, bowing their heads as the procession passes. In towns, shopkeepers may close their shutters. In the fields, laborers pause with tools in hand, their gaze following the cortege until it is gone from sight. Within the church, the air is cool and scented with incense. The priest's voice rises in Latin, words older than the stones around him, as he commends the soul to God. Candles flicker along the altar rail, their light touching the worn faces of those gathered. The dead are lowered into the earth, the first clods falling with a sound that is at once final and familiar. A cross or wooden marker stands over the fresh mound, perhaps with a name carved into it, perhaps not. The day after, life resumes, yet the absence is felt in ways too small for the bell to mark. A place empty at the table, a tool unused in the shed, a voice missing from the morning greetings. These are the quiet tollings that continue long after the bell has fallen silent. I have followed such processions in every age, unseen among the mourners, listening to the steady murmur of prayers and the rustle of wind through the grass. Death, in these times, does not strike as an intruder but as an expected guest. The people know its step, its voice, and the rituals that ease its passing. It walks beside them always, and they do not turn their eyes away. There are seasons in the memory of a people when the tolling of the death bell grows too frequent to bear, when the air itself seems thick with loss. In such times, villages and towns alike are draped in signs of mourning, and none is more common than the black cloth. Hung over doorways, the dark fabric serves both as a signal and a shield. It tells the passerby that death has crossed that threshold, and it spares the grieving household the need to speak it aloud. In narrow streets, whole rows of houses might be marked so, the flutter of the cloth in the wind like a row of silent, watching sentinels. In the years when plague swept through the land, these markers multiplied until they seemed part of the very town itself. I have walked through such streets, shutters drawn, the smell of smoke and vinegar heavy in the air, the only movement the stir of the cloth and the slow pace of the priests carrying the host to those too sick to come to the church. The sound of weeping comes from behind doors, though often it is the only sign of life within. The black cloth was not reserved for plague alone. It might hang for those taken by fever, by winter's chill, by childbirth, or by mischance in the fields. In poorer households, it could be no more than an old garment dyed or darkened with soot. In wealthier homes, It might be edged in fine braid or embroidered with symbols of the Passion. Whatever its form, its meaning was plain to all. Here is a family who walks in the shadow. Sometimes the cloth would remain long after the burial, a sign that grief does not follow the calendar's turning. In such cases, neighbors might stop and speak quietly at the door, offering help with the harvest or a loaf of bread for the table. Grief, in those days, was not seen as something to be hidden or hurried away. It was worn as openly as the cloth itself, a part of the visible fabric of life. In plague years, whole parishes learned to read the black cloth like a map of loss. The baker's shop closed, the mill slowed, the market square stood half empty, each absence marked by a hanging swath of dark fabric. The priest's hands grew raw from the constant sprinkling of holy water, his voice hoarse from prayers repeated over and over. The gravedigger worked by lantern light, the earth turning under his spade long after the sun had set. I have seen the black cloth fade in the sun, its edges frayed by wind, until at last it is taken down. But the absence it marked does not fade with it. It remains in the silence where laughter once was, in the space at the hearth left empty, in the way a neighbor pauses before passing that doorway again. The cloth may be folded and put away, yet in the memory of the village, it still hangs. And in that memory, the shadow of death lingers, long after the wind has ceased to stir its edges. When the grave was filled and the mourning cloth taken down, the living still sought ways to hold the departed close. In every household, there were small, quiet objects kept not for their worth in coin, but for the weight of memory they carried, the tokens of the departed. Some were simple: a lock of hair, bound with thread and kept in a wooden box, a piece of cloth from a favored garment, a knife or spindle worn smooth by years of use. These objects spoke not only of the person, but of their place in daily life, the work they had done, the touch they had left on the world. In wealthier homes, the keepsakes might be more finely made. A carved ring, a small brooch, a rosary whose beads had passed through the same hands in countless prayers. Such items might be worn in remembrance, or kept wrapped in linen and placed near the bed, where the sight of them in the morning might bring a measure of comfort. There were tokens meant for the church as well. A family might donate a candle to be burned on the anniversary of the death, or commission a small carving for the parish altar. In some places, it was the custom to hang a painted board bearing the likeness of the departed in the nave, so that their face would remain among the community during worship. Children often clung to the smallest mementos: a whistle carved from bone, a scrap of ribbon, a wooden toy. I have watched such treasures passed from hand to hand as the child grows, until the memory they carry shifts from something seen to something only felt. The object becomes a bridge to a face no longer clearly recalled, yet still known in the heart. There were also tokens meant for the grave itself: small offerings placed in the coffin or folded into the shroud. A sprig of rosemary for remembrance, a piece of bread for the journey, a coin for the poor to pray for the soul. These were not grand gestures, but personal ones, shaped by love and shaped in turn by the customs of the place. The keeping of such tokens was a way of holding fast to the thread between the living and the dead. They were touched in moments of grief, shown to trusted friends, passed down through generations until their story faded and they became mere curiosities. Yet even then, the hand that held them could feel the faint warmth of the lives they once marked. I have seen these tokens in the humblest huts and in the chambers of lords. I have seen them carried into exile, hidden during war, and buried only to be dug up centuries later, the earth still holding their shape. They are small things, yet they carry within them a weight far greater than their size, the proof that love, once given, seeks always to leave something behind. There are years in the memory of the world when death does not come as a trickle, but as a flood. In such seasons, the shadow it casts is long indeed, and its presence is felt long after the graves are filled. The plague years are among the deepest of these shadows, and even when generations have passed, the air seems to hold their echo. When plague swept through a village, it was as though the ordinary rhythm of life, the toll of the work bell, the calls in the marketplace, the laughter at the tavern, was pulled down into silence. Doors were barred, fields went untended, and the sound of carts in the lanes was more often the rattle of the dead being taken to their rest than the bustle of trade. The sick were marked by fear as much as by their swelling sores and fevers. Neighbors avoided them, sometimes even kin keeping their distance, for the touch that once offered comfort might now bring death. I have walked those streets, unseen, and heard the muffled sobs behind shuttered windows, the muttered prayers of priests as they moved from one darkened house to another. The scent of vinegar hung heavy. It was thought to purify the air, and sprigs of strong herbs were tucked into belts and sleeves as talismans against the unseen breath of the disease. The tolling of the death bell grew so constant that the people stopped counting its notes. Even after the plague's grip loosened, its mark remained. Fields lay fallow for want of hands to work them. Houses stood empty, their hearths cold. Children who had lost both parents were folded into the care of distant kin or left to the charity of the church. The memory of those days became part of every story told in the evening, the cautionary measure by which all other hardships were judged. The survivors carried the shadow with them in quiet ways. Some could not bear to walk past the homes where whole families had been lost. Others flinched at the sound of a cough in the marketplace. Feast days, when they returned, were tinged with a strange urgency. The dancing fiercer, the laughter louder, as though the living wished to push back the darkness by sheer force of joy. In time, the tales of the plague years hardened into lessons for the young. Keep your stores ready for times of want. Beware the spoiled heir. Pray daily for your soul's readiness. These teachings were passed with the same gravity as one might pass down a family heirloom, for they were bought with the dearest coin, the lives of the many. I have seen such memories endure not for years, but for centuries. They are like faint threads woven through the fabric of life, invisible to the unknowing eye, but always present, pulling tight when danger draws near again. And when new sickness comes, as it always will, the whispers of the old plague years rise once more, reminding the living that the shadow has never truly left. In a world where death was never far from the hearth, people learned to shape their lives around its presence rather than in denial of it. This acceptance was not cold or unfeeling, but woven into the fabric of daily living. A quiet knowledge that every harvest, every shared meal, every laughter-filled feast was a gift that might not come again. The church bell that tolled for the dead was also the bell that marked the hours of prayer and work. It was the same sound, a reminder that life and death were not separate realms, but adjoining chambers through which every soul must pass. This awareness gave a certain weight to ordinary acts. The mending of a net, the lighting of a candle, the planting of a seed. Each was a gesture toward the future, though no one could say how far that future might extend. The acceptance of death shaped not only work but joy. Festivals were celebrated with a kind of defiant brightness, as though each song and dance was a victory over the shadow. On feast days, I have seen men who had buried kin that very year stand in the village green, sharing ale and stories with friends, their laughter ringing out in the cool air. The sorrow did not vanish, but it sat beside joy like an old companion, neither banished nor allowed to rule. Children grew up with this understanding early. They walked in funeral processions, saw their elders weep, and learned the prayers for the dead alongside the prayers before meals. To them, the grave was not a distant fear but part of the same ground that grew their bread and herbs. In some ways, this familiarity made them bolder. They climbed trees, raced barefoot across fields, played games with the same vigor their parents worked the land. Life's brevity gave it a sharper flavor. For the elders, acceptance often came with a deepened generosity. Knowing that they could not keep their goods beyond the grave, they gave more freely, to kin, to neighbors, to the poor at the church door. A cloak passed to a younger relative, a cow lent for milking, a basket of apples left for a widow. These acts were not only kindness, but an investment in the living thread of the community that would remain after they themselves were gone. This was not to say that all met death with calm. Some feared it bitterly, clinging to charms and relics in hopes of gaining more years. Others wrestled with the thought of judgment beyond the grave, spending their last days in prayer and confession. Yet even fear did not change the reality that death was certain. And so the living learned to keep their eyes open to both its approach and the life that remained before it. I have watched these people in their final hours, a woman resting her hand in her daughter's, a man asking for the taste of wine one last time, a child's head cradled in the arms of his mother. The moments are simple, but they hold the fullness of what it means to live in the shadow of death and still choose to love, to work, to hope. Thus, the shape of acceptance in the Middle Ages was not resignation, but balance. Holding death in one hand, life in the other, and walking with both until the path came to its quiet end. In that balance, they found a steadiness that carried them through famine, sickness, and loss. And it is a steadiness that still whispers to those willing to hear it, even in ages far removed from their own. In the waning light of autumn, when the last sheaves of grain are gathered and the fields lie bare but for the stubble, the village turns its thoughts to celebration. The harvest feast is not merely a meal. It is the year's great exhalation, a sigh of relief that the work is done and the stores are full enough to carry the people through winter's lean months. I have stood at the edge of such feasts many times, unseen among the throng, watching the long tables take shape in the village green or in the great hall of a manor. Boards are laid across trestles, covered in rough linen, and soon laden with whatever the year has given. Round loaves of bread, wheels of cheese, roasted fowl, apples piled in woven baskets, jugs of ale and wine. The scent of roasting meat drifts on the cool air, mingling with the sharper tang of cider and the faint smoke of nearby hearths. The people gather as the sun sinks, their faces still weathered from the labor of the fields, their hands calloused but now empty of tools. There is laughter in their greetings, for this is the rare time when the whole village comes together without the press of work. The children dart between the tables, clutching crusts of bread, their cheeks pink with the cold. The elders sit nearer the fires, speaking of harvests past and the years when the yield was better or worse. Music begins, often from a single fiddler or a small group of players, their rhythm steady and bright. The dancing starts slowly, a few pairs stepping forward, but soon the space between the tables fills with stamping feet and clapping hands. Even those too old or weary to dance watch with shining eyes, their feet tapping in time beneath the benches. The feast is also a time for sharing beyond the bounds of kin. Plates are passed from one household to another. The poor, the widowed, and the infirm are seated alongside the rest, and their cups filled first. In the abundance of this night, the divisions of wealth and rank soften. The lord of the manor may raise a toast to the village, and the reeve may speak thanks for the Lord's protection, their voices mingling in the same air. As night deepens, the air grows colder, but the warmth of the fires and the nearness of so many bodies keeps the chill at bay. The stars emerge overhead, clear and sharp in the crisp air, and the moon casts a pale light over the fields beyond, fields that, for now, can rest as surely as those who worked them. In such moments, the shadow of sickness and death, so constant in daily life, steps back a little. The people know it will return, it always does, but tonight belongs to life. The harvest feast is proof that joy can bloom in the narrow spaces between hardships, that laughter can rise in the same breath that once carried sorrow. And it is in these spaces that the true strength of the village is revealed. As the feast wears on, the boundaries between light and shadow blur. The fire's glow spills over the tables, flickering across faces flushed with warmth and drink. Beyond the ring of light, the fields lie in quiet darkness, their edges marked only by the faint gleam of starlight on the dew. But here, in the heart of the gathering, there is nothing but movement and sound. The musicians take their place by the largest fire. A fiddler draws his bow across the strings, coaxing out a tune both lively and familiar, one the villagers could hum even in their sleep. A small drum joins in, its steady beat like the echo of footsteps on a wooden floor, and soon a piper adds his breath to the mix, weaving bright threads of melody into the air. The music is not grand or courtly. It is the sound of calloused fingers, of practice stolen between chores, of joy lifted from the dust of daily labor. Dancers form a circle, their hands linked, their steps stamping in time with the drum. The circle turns one way, then the other, skirts and tunics swaying, boots scuffing the packed earth. Children slip between the dancers, laughing, until they are caught up in the movement themselves. Even those who cannot dance still sway with the rhythm, their heads nodding in time, their shoulders relaxing under the music's spell. When the first round of dancing ends, the music shifts to a slower air. Benches are pulled closer to the fires, and the talk turns to stories. These are not read from books, but told from memory. Tales of hunts, of journeys, of strange happenings in the forest. An old man speaks of the year when the river froze so thick that wagons crossed where the bridge had broken. A woman recalls the night she saw lights moving in the marsh, though no man could be found there. Each story is met with murmurs of agreement, questions, or laughter. For here, in the firelight, the boundary between truth and embellishment is a soft one. Some stories are older still, passed down from grandparents long buried. Legends of saints who walked these roads, of kings who once ruled these valleys, of spirits that guard the fields and woods. The telling of them is a kind of weaving, each voice adding a thread to the fabric of the community's memory. A child who hears such a story tonight will, in years to come, tell it again in this same firelight, perhaps with their own embellishments, and so the thread is carried forward. Between stories, songs rise. Some are work songs, their rhythms echoing the swing of a scythe or the thump of a mallet. Others are softer, sung in harmonies that seem to draw the listeners closer to the flame. The verses often tell of love, sometimes fulfilled, sometimes lost, and the refrains are known well enough that all can join in. The voices blend into a sound that is both music and memory, a reminder that, though the years may be hard, they are also shared. In the dance of music, story, and flame, I see the same resilience I have seen in 1,000 harvests. The firelight does not banish the night, but it holds it at bay, creating a circle where warmth and fellowship thrive. This is the strength that remains. Not the absence of hardship, but the choice to kindle light in the face of it. When the songs have softened the air and the stories have warmed the circle, a different restlessness stirs, a lively itch in feet and fingers that no bench can hold. Someone lifts the old leather ball from beneath a trestle. Someone else points to the shadowed edge of the green, where the moon has laid a pale road upon the grass. Laughter answers before any rule is named. This is not the afternoon's riot, but a gentler cousin of it, a moonlit echo that belongs to the closing hours. Children begin it, as they begin most brave and foolish things. Barefoot, ribbon-haired, they dart into the open, the ball skittering between them like a quick animal that no one truly wishes to catch. Their shouts run ahead of them, bright as sparks. Soon the older ones rise too, shrugging off cloaks, tightening belts, and stepping into the edge of the light where faces blur and only movement remains. The moon makes all garments one color, and it is the stride that tells one player from another, the long loping of a plowman, the neat nimble steps of a weaver, the quick feints of a lad who lives for the chase. There are no stakes but delight, and yet pride wakes politely to observe. The gates of the churchyard and the broad ash at the green's far end are chosen as goals. The night's damp has laid a gloss on the grass, and boots slip with a hiss. The ball travels not by plan so much as by mood. A rush here, a reversal there, a tumble into laughter when two friends collide and sit blinking at the stars. Mothers call soft warnings. Fathers grin and say nothing, for halting a game at this hour would feel like pinching the flame of a candle that has only just learned to burn steady. At the edge of the field, quieter contests brew. A line of flat stones is set upon a low wall, and men take turns pitching pebbles to knock them down. Each success greeted not with a shout but with a low murmur of pleased surprise, as one gives when good bread rises higher than hoped. A length of rope is found, and there is tugging in good humor, the ground between scuffed into a darker strip. Baskets appear from nowhere, and someone counts the number of walnuts a child can toss into them from a few paces off. In such games, the body spends no great store of strength, yet pays out coins of joy that gleam just as brightly. Archers, unwilling to let a day end without one last measure, stand back from the dance of feet and pitch their skill to the night. They do not shoot at distance, for darkness is a clumsy steward, but at small black circles pinned to straw where the moon spills most cleanly. The hiss and thrum carry little farther than the nearest hedge, and each arrow's bite is judged by the tilt of brows and an approving hum. A boy whose shots have flown wild all afternoon finds his hand steady now. Under the night's veil, his breath grows slow, and the feathered shaft lands true enough to be remembered. He will dream of that sound, and it will follow him into other seasons like a quiet blessing. And there, see, the old games of laughter that peel away the years. A blindfold is tied upon a willing friend, a strip of linen smelling of rosemary and smoke. They are turned thrice upon the grass, and their seeking hands lift like the feelers of a moth. The rest circle in soft-footed mischief, allowing a shoulder to be brushed, a sleeve to be caught, then slipping away before capture completes itself. Even those who have wept this year forget themselves for a little while, swallowed by the merry cruelty of almost being found. When a lull arrives, as all joy arrives and pauses and arrives again, someone sets 2 short stakes in the earth and proposes a running leap. The measure grows by a palm each round, the jumpers walking back a few paces, breathing as if the cool night could be drawn into the calves, the knees, the soles of the feet. Skirts are gathered, belts loosened, and each attempt wins either applause or a mock groan at the grass-stained fall. It is a simple trial and therefore beloved. The body remembers how to fly for the time it takes to cross a space and land laughing. Not all contests are for the young. Near the fire, the elders' games are those of wit and hand. Knucklebones clatter in a wooden bowl, the pieces spilled upon a cloak to be read like a small prophecy of luck. A carving knife appears, and an apple is pared in a single curling ribbon, each elder trying to cut a strip longer than the last without breaking it. A woman with steady hands wins by calm alone, her peel falling to her lap like a pale serpent. She smiles without triumph. The grace of the gesture is prize enough. There is, too, the quiet sport of storytelling turned to challenge. One voice begins a tale, and when the drum taps from the musician's corner, the next must take it up without breaking the thread. The story flares, darkens, twists. A wily fox becomes a pilgrim. A lost ring becomes a relic. A winter storm opens upon a harvest already gathered against it. When anyone stumbles, the whole circle rescues the tale with a cheerful noise, and it lurches forward, patched but whole, like a well-mended cloak. I have watched the moon lean westward over such play in 100 autumns. I have seen the same small kindness when a child is lifted from a tangle of legs, the same gentle teasing when a strong man slips and must pretend he chose to sit precisely where he landed. I have seen the same pause when a distant bell marks the hour, not as command but as companion, reminding all that night grows old and beds are waiting. Before the game scatter, there is usually one last test, not of power but of patience and poise. Someone sets a full cup upon the crown of the head and dares another to cross the green without spilling. The path chosen is never straight. It winds between benches and sleepers, around the shadow of the churchyard wall, through a shallow patch of moonlight that seems, to those watching, like a stream to be forded. The walker's arms float out like wings. A hush falls. A child giggles and is silenced by a conspirator's hand. When the cup arrives unspilled, the cheer is soft but deep, for such triumphs feel akin to blessings. Proof that steadiness is its own kind of strength. By then, breath grows white in the air. The ball is returned to its place. The rope is coiled. Arrows are gathered from straw. Stones swept from the wall back into the palm of the earth. Hands clap dust from tunics in little puffs that glow and vanish. The green returns to its usual quiet, though it keeps the mark of the evening. Here a scuffed crescent. There a heel print with a star of dew in its center, as if the sky had lent the ground a piece of itself and forgotten to take it back. What remains is the memory of weight well spent. Lungs filled and emptied in joy, legs stretched not for necessity but for pleasure, voices pitched not to warn or command, but to praise and tease. The games of the green are a low flame that refuses to die, even when winds of hunger and illness and toil blow hard. They are proof, lasting and stubborn, that the body can be more than a vessel of work or worry. It can be a bell rung in gladness, a cup carried steady, a leap made for no gain but the sweet bewilderment of landing. I move along the margin where the last players wander home, past the ash that served as a goal, past the gate that has counted so many victories made of nothing but breath. In the silence that follows, I can still hear the soft thud of the ball, the polite collapse of a rope upon the grass, the long thread of a laugh that began in one throat and ended in another. The moon, patient witness, rides lower. The village exhales. And in that gentle letting go, the strength that remains shines brightest. Not as a blaze, but as the steadfast ember that says, "We live today, and we will live tomorrow, if we are granted the breath." When the night grows late and the green empties of its games, the warmth of the feast draws inward. Fires that once roared in the open are banked and carried into hearths, where their glow becomes softer, more private. The air beyond the door is crisp enough to turn each breath into a pale ghost, but within, the warmth seeps into the bones like a gentle tide. The villagers gather in smaller knots now, each home taking in its own share of the revelers. Doors are left open for a while, so neighbors may wander in and out, trading a final cup of cider or a last slice of bread before the night's end. The scent inside is a layered thing: wood smoke and roasting meat, the sharper sweetness of apples baked in honey, the faint musk of wool cloaks steaming as their dampness meets the heat. It is here, in this quieter hour, that the telling of hearthside tales begins in earnest. The stories that thrive in the warmth are different from those told in the open. They lean closer to the heart, not so much about heroes and spirits as about kin long gone, or happenings that still weigh softly on the mind. An old woman speaks of her wedding night and the snow that fell so thick it muffled the church bell. A man recalls the year he and his brother nearly lost the oxen in a spring flood, saved only by the quick work of neighbors with ropes and poles. Children curl on benches or in the laps of their mothers, their eyes heavy but unwilling to close. They listen to these accounts with the same attention they give to legends, for in their young minds, the line between truth and wonder is a thin one. A tale of a winter storm can sit beside a tale of a wandering saint without discord. Both are received as part of the same world, where the miraculous and the ordinary walk side by side. Some stories are told in fragments, each speaker adding a detail from memory. A father may recall a tune his mother sang. His sister, seated nearby, remembers the words. They hum it together, the melody rising in the dim light, and others join in until the whole room is wrapped in the sound. When the song ends, there is a hush, not awkward, but restful, like the silence between waves on a shore. The embers in the hearth shift, sending up small bursts of light. The shadows they cast sway on the plastered walls, flickering over the beams and the woven herbs hung there to dry. These herbs, rosemary for remembrance, lavender for peace, seem to lean in, lending their scent to the stillness. Outside, the wind moves softly through the thatch and bare branches, as if listening in. From time to time, a storyteller will pause to sip from a cup, letting the pause itself carry weight. These silences are as much a part of the telling as the words. In them, listeners may see in their minds the snow-covered fields of the wedding, or the brown floodwaters surging around the oxen. Memory is not rushed here. It is savored. Before the night's end, one story is often chosen for its ability to quiet the room entirely. Something not frightening, but deep enough to leave the mind in thought. It may be a parable from Scripture, or the account of a journey taken years ago that changed the teller's life. These are not told for entertainment alone, but to pass along a small truth, folded gently into the shape of a tale so that it may be remembered. Gradually, voices soften. A child is lifted and carried to bed. A neighbor pulls his cloak tighter and makes for home, his boots crunching on the frost outside. The fire sinks lower, its light slipping from the walls until only the faces nearest the hearth remain visible. One by one, the listeners drift into silence, their thoughts already half in dreams. The night will end, as all nights do, but here, in these last hours, the strength that remains is not in movement or labor, but in the keeping of stories. They are the threads that tie each soul to the next, across years and generations, a warmth that outlives the fire and lingers in the mind long after the embers have gone cold. By the time the last story has been told and the last cup drained, the village lies in a hush that even the wind respects. Doors are drawn to, shutters latched against the night, and only a few windows still show the orange blink of a fading fire. Inside, those final embers glow like the heart of the feast itself. Smaller now, but still alive, holding heat enough to keep the chill from creeping in before morning. I drift through the sleeping lanes, where frost has begun to lace the edges of the thatch and silver the ruts in the road. The air smells of wood smoke and earth gone cold, and each breath seems to catch a fragment of the night's laughter, now softened into memory. Footprints mark the grass on the green, crossing and recrossing in a pattern the moon alone can read, the afterscript of games and dances, already fading as the dew gathers. In one cottage, a child stirs and murmurs in sleep, clutching the wooden toy he refused to set aside even for the feast. In another, an old man rests with his hand on the arm of his chair, as if he has only paused a moment before telling the next story. Somewhere a dog shifts on the threshold, ears pricked at a sound only he can hear. The whole village feels caught in a breath, that deep, suspended moment when the world holds still between what has been and what will come. The embers in each hearth are tended before sleep. Coals are raked together, tucked under ash, or a single log is set to burn slow until morning. This keeping of the ember is more than simple prudence. It is a quiet ritual, a promise that the light of this night's joy will carry forward, ready to kindle again when the next gathering comes. Even in darkness, the warmth remains, hidden but sure. Beyond the cottages, the fields lie bare under the stars. The furrows are sharp-edged in the moonlight, and here and there a forgotten sheaf leans like a sentry at its post. The land rests now, as do the people, both gathering strength for the labors that winter will demand. There is no illusion that the months ahead will be easy. The cold will bite, stores will dwindle, sickness will take its share. Yet tonight's feast has planted something deeper than grain, the certainty that life is worth the tending, even in its lean seasons. I pause at the edge of the green and look back. A faint curl of smoke rises from the manor's chimney. From the church, the bell tower stands against the stars like a sentinel. In that stillness, I can almost hear the echo of the music, the steady beat of the drum that carried the dancers in their circles. These sounds, though gone, have left an imprint, the way a footprint lingers in snow long after the walker has passed. The first light of dawn will come soon, a pale wash at the rim of the world. When it does, the village will wake to its tasks. Bread to bake, animals to tend, wood to split. Yet something of the feast will remain in the tilt of a smile, in the pause of a hand to share a crust, in the way a child's voice carries a song learned the night before. Strength here is not measured in the lifting of stones or the plowing of fields, but in the choice to greet the day with the same hearts that gathered in joy under the harvest moon. As the night thins toward morning, I take one last look at the embers glowing faintly through a half-closed door. They are a small thing, but their light is steady, and in that steadiness lies the truth of this place. That warmth and fellowship, once kindled, can endure beyond the longest shadow. This is the strength that remains, a quiet, enduring ember, ready to blaze anew when the need is greatest. The village sleeps now, its breath slow and deep beneath the weight of the night. I stand at the gate, the wooden bars cool beneath my hand, and look back one last time. The rooftops are silvered with frost, the chimneys still breathing the faintest trails of smoke. Here and there, a small ember's glow leaks from the cracks of a shutter, the last heartbeat of the feast that has now slipped entirely into memory. Beyond the green, the fields stretch into shadow, each furrow and hedge softened by the moon's pale touch. The air holds the scent of earth turned and rested, of wood smoke, of apples still lingering in the cool. The quiet here is deep enough to hold the echo of everything that came before. The music, the laughter, the footsteps in the grass, the low murmur of voices trading stories by the fire. I walk a little way down the road, the frost crunching beneath my steps. The sound is small, yet it feels as though it carries far into the still corners of the night. Above, the stars shine cold and constant, the same stars that watched the games on the green, the same that have looked down on countless harvest feasts in countless other villages across the centuries. Life in this age is a fragile thing, bound to the turning of the seasons, the health of the body, and the mercy of the earth. Yet in that fragility lies a strange strength, the knowledge that every shared meal, every clasp of a hand, every song lifted to the firelight is precious precisely because it will not last. These people know it, they live by it, and it gives their joy a brightness that lingers even as the night fades. At the bend in the road, I pause and look back one last time. The village is only a dark shape now, with the faint outline of the church tower against the sky. Soon the dawn will come, and the cycle will begin again. Work, worry, laughter, rest. The thread continues. When you rise tomorrow, remember this: you too walk the same thread they once walked. Tread gently, and let each breath be treasured.